Or let me know when we're.
I'm waiting till Megan says I can call the meeting order.
Yeah, I got it. Oh,
I have to step out at 9:30 for a 5-minute call.
Sure, thank you for letting me know.
Okay, I think we're good.
Just so everyone's aware, we do have a reasonable accommodation requester that is online
Is
too.
it Diane?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Just checking.
Okay, we are live and you can call to order.
Call the meeting to order. Everyone have been joining the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Commissioner Johnson.
Here.
Great. I'd like to welcome everyone to today's Planning Commission hearing and note that there is an ADA accommodation online. Joining us, the meeting is open to in-person participation and may be observed online through the Placer County website. If you would like to make a public comment on any item today, the Planning Commission clerk will announce when you are to line up and provide testimony. Please be prepared to speak at the time I open public comment for a specific item you would like to address, which may include public comment for matters not on the published agenda or hearing items. Each commenter will be entitled to 3 minutes of comment. Thank you for your consideration as we work to ensure that each citizen who wishes to comment has the opportunity to do so. Please be advised that today's hearing is being recorded and will be available on the Planning Commission's webpage following this hearing. I'll now move on to the next agenda item, which is a report from the county's planning director.
And-
Mr. Lord.
Before we go to that, I just want to clarify one thing. Since this is a special meeting today, there will not be a public comment for items not on the agenda.
Okay.
So there will be a public comment for the one item that's on here, the workshops. So that we won't include public comment at that point, but there is no general public comment because of the nature of the meeting.
Great, thank you.
Mentioned has been initiated. We are working on to include housing amendments to the TBAP, and this again will provide funding for the environmental review for that amendment package. And then on 415, we have 4 items headed to the board. 3 of those have previously been considered by the Planning Commission, so the Mahoney Rezone Project, the Bickford Ranch DA Amendment, the Green Means Go closeout, which again is with the Auburn Bowman, or for the Auburn Bowman Community Plan. The 4th item is a Williamson Act agreement. Those aren't presented in front of the Planning Commission, but planning has 4 items on that date. Upcoming Planning Commission meetings, as you can tell by the binders that are back there for you, we have a very lengthy meeting planned for you with 5 items on the agenda for your next meeting next week, including the Mill Creek draft EIR hearing to receive comment. We have Placer Commerce Center request. 2 projects in Tahoe, and then in the afternoon, following a break to have lunch, we will have the housing element amendment. That'll be this now is the conclusion of the rezone effort, this housing amendment package, and we'll be asking for a recommendation to take to the Board of Supervisors. On 410, we also have what's shaping up to be a relatively full agenda. 4 items, tentative items there include Winchester subdivision. It's a map modification for a specific lot. 2 actions on Placer Ranch, and then the Ivy project in Granite Bay. I did also want to note that we are, as you can see here, contemplating a meeting on 424 in Tahoe. So,
And I won't be here on 424, so Amber will be chairing that meeting.
okay. Yeah, and so if anyone else is not going to be in attendance, please do let myself and the clerk of the board know so that we can make preparations. But again, I'd be planning on a 424 meeting in Tahoe.
Is there a Placer 2050 meeting around that time as well?
Yeah, not until
there.
April 30th.
Oh, the 30th.
Yeah, yeah. So good segue, general plan updates. We do have a number of these visioning workshops coming up. We've done 4 of them. We have 3 more remaining. The ones that we have held, attendance has been reasonably well attended. We've averaged somewhere between 25 to 40 people at each one of these workshops.
Can I ask a Question on the
Yes.
last one, the Tahoe Event Center.
Mhm.
Do you anticipate discussions and presentations, or I don't know what else would there would be, about the idea of a North Tahoe formation?
I don't expect that to be a part of the part of this April 30th date. It is, we are doing the open house as part of the Discover and Discuss sessions that they've been having in Tahoe at the event center. So there'll be different topic areas
Sure.
for conversations if you've been to one of the Discover and Discuss, although I'm not certain that there would be one on the incorporation
Right.
efforts. Yeah.
On that point, the last question I'll ask, if you don't mind, is there a role at all in the incorporation process for the commission, or does it go Board of Soups, LAFCO, and back, and we're outside of it?
You're outside.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, so you have the dates there. The next one is April 2nd, City of Lincoln, and then there'll be an online workshop on the 5th, and then wrapping up on April 30th. So once we get all of those visioning workshops complete, our staff are going to be putting together the vision for the 2050, the Placer 2050 effort. Based on, these workshops have just been one way of soliciting input. We also have completed a statistically significant survey of all Placer County residents. We have over close to 1,100 responses to that survey.
Online or in mail?
It was phone, mail, and online. They used various methods to, get to a statistically significant result. So that is going to be used, to craft this vision, as well as the workshops, and then also key stakeholder meetings. And so that vision statement and document will come first to the Planning Commission. We're looking at probably a late May, early June timeframe to the Planning Commission before going to the board for ultimate approval of the vision statement for the Placer 2050 effort. And then the last thing that I'll just mention is, again, the quarterly reports. You should expect those at next week's meeting. So we're putting those together. Again, that'll be a report of all of the current active projects that will, by district, that will be ultimately coming to the
That is
Planning
super
Commission.
helpful. That has just been, for me, super helpful.
Yep. And
This one
that's,
will be different than the one that's, there's one that's in the internet already, but this will be different from that one?
it would be different, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Specific to the planning commission.
It will be specific to the Planning Commission in the sense that these are all projects that will be heard by ultimately heard by either the board or the Planning Commission. So they will be items that will come to you first.
So you can get a heads up, go to the MAC if it's coming
What's
to the MAC,
coming,
or
yeah.
meet with the developer, meet with the community, and that kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I mean, there's one that's on the internet right now that lists all the projects that have applications in to the county.
Yeah, and again, this will be teased out for ones that are just specific to items that will be coming here.
Okay, so it's not necessarily max, it's for us.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And that's all I have. I'm happy to answer other questions that
Any questions for
commissioners
Chris?
might have.
Do you think that, do you know what items are gonna be on the 424 agenda, Chris? I'm just trying to, if I'm gonna chair it, I have to teach that night via Zoom, so if it's gonna
Yeah.
be a long day, I would try to find a place.
It will not be a long
Okay.
day. Currently, we only have one item, but it is a Tahoe item, and we do want it to be heard in Tahoe.
Okay,
And so that's the one that we're working on. We'll be looking to potentially add some additional items to that
Okay.
agenda,
okay,
but not hearing items.
gotcha. Okay, thanks.
I'll have Kelsey connect with you on timing too.
Okay,
Just so that we can ensure that if we need to get an accommodation, a room or something like that, that we can do all that.
okay,
So I'll make
sounds
a note of
good.
that.
Thank you.
Is that Ice Lakes Lodge, is that Serene Lakes?
It is,
That's still what they call that?
yeah.
Any other questions for Director Pulley? Thank you, Chris.
Okay.
Next item on the planning agenda are commissioner reports. Do any commissioners have anything to report out, information that they'd like to share? Hearing none, we will move on. We're now moving on to our hearing item, which is the Planning Commission's Procedures and Governance Workshop. Chris will be kicking off the workshop.
Yeah, and I handed out, with the handout I had my notes on.
I handed it back to you. They went that way.
There was another,
That one came back.
there was another handout as well. I apologize.
Nobody got anything else. Is this it? Or that
No,
yours?
that's from last time.
Okay.
It got lost in the
Wing it, huh?
shuffle.
It got lost in the shuffle.
Oh, could it be,
No, that's
oh, here's, I'll bet this is it. It says explain the purpose
Yep.
item.
Yeah.
I was wondering what that
His
was.
key. Oh, we're all gonna read it. No, poor guy.
I know. It's okay. It's
written
okay.
It's written in a different language than you.
Planning director language?
Yeah, that's
Find a
right.
watch,
That's
he's a
right.
lady.
I
Okay,
didn't
so,
understand what it was.
no worries. Okay, so you all have the planning commission procedures document in front of you, as well as a copy of the very lengthy PowerPoint presentation. So, you're going to use the PowerPoint, at least that second slide, to give a little bit of an overview of the item and what we're going to be doing here today. So a little bit about why this item was scheduled for hearing. As I think most of you are aware, we do have some more recent members to the commission. The clerk of the board began their engagement with the planning commission in early 2024, January, I believe, 2024. And at that time, we had some conversations about just the operations of the planning commission, both clerk of the board, county council, and myself, and identified that there was no procedures document that governed the planning commission, and identified that as a real deficiency in our setup. And talked about, it really being a best practice to have a procedures document. In the past, I think the Planning Commission has sort of relied on the board's procedures to run meetings and to carry out the procedures and the policy or the processes of the Planning Commission. So today's meeting format is, largely based on the board's recent, I believe, workshop to review their procedures and to develop some refinements to their procedures. And, similar to their workshop, this one obviously off-site, a little bit more of a informal setting to encourage more discussion, a little bit more of a roll up your sleeves type of conversation, again, working session. And the main goal of the session is really to review the draft procedures, provide direction to staff on maybe some refinements to these procedures, and then following that direction, we will work on refining this document and then bringing it back to the Planning Commission for final adoption. So in addition to the procedures document, our team also identified a couple of other more administrative type topics that we think are important to review with the commission, and those are the other items that are listed on the PowerPoint. So to that end, we organized the discussion into three topical, let me borrow this, three topical buckets for consideration today. So the first topic area is the Planning Commission procedures document. The second is conversation around the Brown Act, Administrative Record, Public Records Act requests. And the third is related to email accounts. So those are going to be, again, the kind of three topic areas for today's meeting. As it relates, we'll kind of start in on the procedures document. We've sort of identified a few things under that procedures document that we'd like to highlight for conversation, and they kind of flow with how you, or the order that you find them in the document. So want to have a conversation about the officers, compensation, the Zoom platform, although that's not specifically listed here. We thought that it would make sense to have that conversation. Meeting format, and then code of ethics. Now, I know that there's been some recent, particular recent conversation about ethics and ethics training, and especially given the conference that a majority of you went to, there was a lot of talk about it at our last meeting. And so even though it's listed here as a little bit of a later topic on the agenda, we thought we'd actually start there. And we do have Hannah from County Counsel's office that's going to give a quick overview, and then we'll have a discussion about that. I don't know, anything
Yeah.
else to add,
And
Clayton?
I just wanted to mention too, there is a biannual ethics obligation that, as commissioners, you need to have. So 2 hours of ethics training. That is separate from this, but this will kind of cue you up for some of the potential ethics issues to be aware of. So,
And the training's offered online,
It is.
yeah.
and was also offered at the conference. So if we don't get it this year and you go to the conference next year in Anaheim, you can go 2 hours earlier before the conference starts and get your little certificate.
I think
And-
you gotta do it this year if you're due.
Every 2 years.
Yeah, if you haven't done it.
If you
before.
would need, yeah, and I believe Kelsey sent emails out, and if she hasn't, she'll be sending them with
Okay.
the link
We haven't gotten it.
to attend the training through Fair Political Practice if you choose to do it that way.
Or we can submit our certificate of completion
yep.
from the conference. Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And along the same lines, there is also a harassment training requirement that is every 2 years as well. So if you
And
haven't done it in 2 years, now's
And
the
if we
time
have
to
it through our
update it.
company, we can submit our.
We need to have the actual certificates, so,
Yeah.
yes, you can submit the actual certificates and we'll
Because
take a
if you
look
have
at it.
state of California contracts or work on state
Yeah,
of California contracts, you have to do it, so we already have it.
Every employer
Are we
has-
the,
every employer
is
has to
it,
do
is it okay to do the non-supervisory harassment training? Or does the
I'd have
planning
to
there's
look
three
in. I
different
believe it
ones.
likely is, but yeah,
We'll
let me
we
check.
can send
You'll
the
take
certificate
one.
and you'll
Send me the
determine?
certificate and I'll let you
Okay.
know if it's
There are
adequate.
multiple
There are 3
options.
different kinds.
Yes.
Right.
Will we have a trigger to remind us, or is this something I gotta worry
No,
about
we
now?
will start a reminder process. So what we're gonna do is tie it in with the conference, because there is the option to complete it at the conference. So when the conference gets scheduled and we determine which commissioners will be attending, Kelsey will say, please note, this is available, and she'll let you know if you're due.
They offer both. They
I
offer
don't
one
need-
the day before. and
So
then
you
one
don't
more.
have to track it. Once you complete
I don't have to do
it,
it now.
I'd have to look if we've done yours okay, then you will need to do it, and
Okay.
and then we will track it from there.
Never heard of it before.
Yeah, like I started in August of '23,
Mhm.
done nothing, so I'm probably need to get
Yeah.
on it sooner than later.
So this is 4 hours. It's 2 hours for sexual harassment, 2 hours for ethics.
Yeah, I've done it a couple times, but I don't remember the last time I did it.
Teach you how to be ethically sexual.
Maybe the opposite.
So,
Okay,
Yeah,
and
we'll
so-
move forward with that. So, good to go ahead. You can go from there if you want.
Go from here?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's fine.
Would anybody have any, can we close that curtain? Is that, anybody object to that?
Oh, we don't
It's
get to
just-
see the
I
sunny
was gonna say, I
sky,
think
George?
I didn't know
your one
if
will
it won't,
only
don't worry about
go-
it.
I
Sorry.
think we
Oh,
had
it's
that, I think we had that issue in a
I was gonna
couple
say,
of-
we've
maybe-
had it- we've
maybe
had
the
it more than
rezone-
once.
The
We're good.
rezone meeting,
We're
it was
good.
one of
I
them.
just
Oh,
put
it
my
doesn't
shades
shut?
on.
No.
Oh,
That's fine.
Want me to pass them
Yeah.
Sit on this side.
Yes, no, I'm past there's that.
I'll be okay. It'll keep me awake.
That's true, right?
And I do have a question. Will I be getting a county email?
So we're gonna
We'll-
cover
we'll-
emails
we'll
later.
talk about that. That's-
We're gonna dive into those.
That's
later
number
in the-
3 on the agenda. We'll get there, we'll get there.
Great foreshadowing.
Yeah, we'll get
I
there.
waited long enough to get the new process.
That's what that is.
Right, Hannah, go ahead.
Been gone for 30 years, what the hell?
Good morning, Chair Dahlgren, Planning Commissioners. My name is Anna Kreuzer, Deputy County Counsel. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about ethics this morning, conflicts of interest and the Levine Act. So just to kind of start, sitting, acting as the planning commission, you're acting like a quasi judicial body, which means you're kind of like a judge when you're in the planning commission room. And anytime you hear an application on a matter like a use permit, you're acting as a quasi judicial entity. And anytime that you're acting in this capacity, it's important that you act in a neutral and unbiased manner. So what exactly does that mean? Neutral and unbiased means that there are no personal conflicts of interest, there's no prejudgment on the facts, and there's no prejudice against the parties. And so my presentation today will focus on that conflict of interest component, and specifically the financial conflict of interest, which is provided both in the state government code and incorporated into the Placer County Code, Chapter 2, Article 84. So a financial conflict of interest. A planning commissioner would have a financial interest in a decision where it is reasonably foreseeable that the decision would have a material effect on, material financial effect, distinguishable from an effect on the public at large on either the planning commissioner and his or her family, an entity or property in which the planning commissioner has a direct or indirect investment of $2,000 or more, any business entity in which the planning commissioner is an officer, director, employee, or management official, any source of income of $500 or more received by the planning commissioner in the preceding 12 months, and any donor of gifts of $250 or more in value, either provided to or promised to the planning commissioner within 12 months prior to a decision. And it's not always clear-cut whether there is a financial conflict of interest. It can be a gray area. So if you ever have any questions, it's advisable to consult with counsel. So if you do determine that you have a disqualifying financial interest, it doesn't mean that you've done anything wrong. It just means that you can't participate in that particular decision. When you have made this determination, it's not only you can't participate in the decision, you also can't act in your capacity as planning commissioner to influence that decision. And when you've made this identification, it's important that you disclose this financial interest on the record, that you recuse yourself from discussing and voting on the matter, and that you leave the room until the discussion, the final vote, or any other disposition on the matter is completed. And this recusal is important because the failure to do so not only could void the decision, but there is the potential for criminal, civil, or administrative sanctions.
One question on that. If you're just absent in that meeting, you would have no official recusal. Does it still have to go through official channels?
Right, so if you're absent from the meeting completely, then you don't have any formal recusal requirements. However, there is a distinction if you, if like the item's the first item on the list or the end, and if it's on the first and then you show up late, you still have an obligation to then identify the interest. The same with leaving early if it's the last item.
Oh.
So if you show up for part of the meeting, you have to disclose the conflict even if you weren't there for the part of it. But if
Okay.
you're completely gone from the whole meeting, then there's no disclosure requirement.
And would it be helpful for us to disclose to you in advance if we have something coming up, so you just know, rather
Yeah.
than holding it for the meeting? Okay.
100%. Any of these items that get to a gray area where you're thinking about it, come speak with us first, and we'll guide you through the process for it.
Kind of splitting hairs, but if you're recused, stay offline too?
Yeah.
Watching, viewing it
So
online?
there's a little bit of yes. The recommendation would be once you recuse, you have to leave completely, and
And not, I may not.
His
come
question
in
was viewing it.
So
you can view it
view
on
it.
YouTube.
yes,
I guess.
After the fact.
The reason you can't participate in Zoom live if we had a Zoom connection.
I don't mean live, just watching the recording.
Yes, you could watch the recording.
And we can't be in the room.
You can't be in the room, and the reasoning for that is they're afraid that you might have some sort of hand signal or gesture or something that might then convince the other commissioners that they should vote one way or the other.
Isn't that a gray area though? For like, I won't talk about it in detail, but the donut issue of if you're 500 to 1,000 feet from a property, technically you can recuse yourself, but still
Right.
participate as a public member?
There is an exception if you have a personal interest that is at issue in the meeting. So if there is a project that you're conflicted out as a commissioner, but you have a personal interest to because you live close to the property and you're affected personally, you are still allowed to participate in that meeting as a personal member of the public, but not as a commissioner.
But I thought we had to get a permission from our supervisor to do that. At least, no?
No,
Okay.
no. But you do, anytime you get to that area, come speak with us and we'll let you know,
Yes.
because that is an
Clayton
exception to the
knows.
general rule. And that is because you have a personal stake in the decision and you still have the ability to convey your
Yeah.
opinion because of that personal stake. But you do it as a member of the public, not as a commissioner.
And Clayton, sorry to chime in, correct me if I'm wrong, they would have to go onto the dais, recuse, and give
Right.
that announcement. So they would have
Yeah.
to make the statement at the meeting that they are recusing from the vote due to the conflict.
Right.
Right.
So they
And
would,
just go back and stand in line.
And then they would
yeah,
have
they
to
can't just
indicate,
like
And
pop
then
down.
and then they would have to indicate they're participating
You
as a
don't have
member
to
of the
leave. Yes.
public.
Okay, then I wouldn't
Yeah.
have to leave. I'm just like thinking about
Right.
Morgan Crossings, because last time I had to go.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get up and
No.
talk about it as a member of the public,
So
but I can do
it-
that.
The exception depends on how close you
Yeah.
are to the property. You have to be close enough that your
Yeah.
personal issue is at stake, which means within 1,000 feet of the project.
Just make sure that you
So I can do
Talk
that.
to
consult
Clayton.
with council before
He-
the meeting.
he
And
knows.
then you're okay.
Yes.
Oh,
He'll
okay,
tell
because
you what
last
to
time I
do.
had to leave. Next time I'll be there.
So, yeah, I didn't,
You should
I didn't
ask
realize
him.
that you
Yes.
were so close to
yeah,
the
I'm that
project
close.
that,
Yeah.
yeah, in that instance, then you can comment as a member of the public.
Awesome. I'll work on my speech now.
A clarification on that though, so in that exception area, there's still a gray area about, you still have to operate as a planning commissioner leading up to the meeting. Like, I can't,
Right.
because of a
Yes.
project, go talk to
Sure.
every single
Right.
planning commissioner
Of course.
as if I was a member of the public.
Right.
Yeah,
So, yeah, going back to that quasi judicial capacity, you are not allowed to convey your position on any of these items prior to the meeting.
But wouldn't that
That's-
influence the commission? If I got up as a member of the public and spoke about it, how it affects me personally? Look at you smiling like.
I mean, that's,
It's-
so that's the way it's
legally, you're
allowed in
right,
the
though.
code. So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's certainly arguments that you are still persuading the commission. The way it's set up in the code is that, yes, you may be persuading them, but you're doing it as a member of the public.
Yeah.
So there's
And it
a-
is permissible.
it's
So
your
there's a legal
right.
versus a perception
Right. There-
of,
with all
perception
of
of
these-
bias or perception of.
There is an optics component, which you will have to navigate as public officials.
Sure.
But there is a legal requirement, and I can
Okay.
provide you the legal guidance
do it.
that says legally you're allowed to. That optics other component is something that you will likely have to weigh and navigate.
Yeah.
on your
Get
own.
ready, people, we're coming.
And that also includes written comments ahead of time, correct,
Right.
as a public member?
Well,
So
if
you
you-
I think
cannot
what-
do, you cannot
Oh.
do that.
so
I'm
if
pretty-
you provided
you
written
could-
comments beforehand to the commissioners, you're actually
Then
then
you're-
potentially engaging in a Brown Act.
So yeah,
Oh.
I'm asking all these questions because he's already consulted me.
That's good.
It's
to
really,
know.
yeah, so if I'm correct,
You're not allowed
you
to
can't
comment,
do
you're not allowed to
anything
provide writing
ahead.
to the other commissioners.
Yes,
Yeah, they could provide them at the hearing, correct? That's the only
Right.
time that
After
you
you
could provide
recuse
your written
yourself.
comments
Okay.
would be after
Yeah.
recusal, but, we make those comments that you provide available to the public and to
Got
the
it.
commissioners for review.
Ding, ding, ding.
And
Yeah.
so it,
3 minutes, baby, 3
Yeah.
minutes.
So for Morgan Crossing, maybe send me your address so I can check and confirm that you're
Sure,
close enough to
sure.
it, that we're
Sure.
good with all
Will
of this.
do.
She'd still have to step off the dais and go
Yeah.
into the.
Yes,
She's a
yes,
public.
she is not sitting as a member of the
And then I
commission
have to
at that point,
leave
she's in
because
the
I can
public.
influence them with my face. I have a
no,
very expressive
you don't
face.
have to.
That's the
No.
exception where you are allowed,
Yeah.
as long as you
If
have a
you're wi-
personal issue,
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
so
interest at
confused.
stake.
Okay,
You should have him check your distance, yeah,
okay.
yeah.
But there's an
Sure.
economic factor too. It affects me economically, even let's say I'm 1,002 feet away.
No, it's very clear about the distance.
So,
Ah.
if you get outside of 1,000 feet, then you have to show that there is in fact,
Well, that's easy to do.
a physical impact to you financially,
That's easy to
that because of this, you will be impacted. It is presumed, if you're under 500 feet, that there is that financial impact.
Sure.
Between 500 and 1,000, there's factors that you have to look into. Outside of 1,000 feet, it's presumed that you don't have a conflict, so you have to, there's a further burden of evidence that you have to show that you're
Well, because this
financially
involves closing a
impacted.
business, so that does involve
Okay, you
We'll
know,
talk later.
you know, you need to discuss
We'll
this
talk
with
later.
the
We'll talk later.
because we're being influenced right now.
We'll talk later.
Good point. Good call, Richard.
Oh, sorry, Hannah, that was
A
long.
little bit of a,
There's a lot of questions around ethics, I get it.
That's because
So
we're
switching gears a little bit,
Hannah, I did have one other question, and it can be maybe a case by case. If you have, if there's a project that's related, that's land use related, like say for something the Health and Human Services wants to do land use wise, has nothing to do with Medi-Cal contracts per se, and I am involved in Medi-Cal contracts for my job, do I have to recuse myself if it's a land use decision, anything related to Health and Human Services, or is it case by case?
For each of those, check with us.
Okay.
And it really does depend on the specific action in front of the planning commission.
Okay. Okay.
But the base level, just think, is there any potential that you financially benefit from the planning commission's action?
decision,
If you
okay.
do, then likely you have a recusal issue.
Okay, okay.
Look, let me give you a different, the example, I see Winchester's coming up, and I talked to you about the 1,000 feet difference. Should we disclose that, hey, I'm not recusing myself, even though I live here? Or should we just,
So in that instance, I think there's a
think it's
best practices and a legal requirement.
exactly.
The legal requirement is if you fit within the area that's beyond the, so that you can participate, then you're legally allowed to. The legal requirements are meant to be the lowest bar, right? So outside of that, then you have that kind of optics and piece.
Optics, yeah,
I think as
so-
a best practices, if you're close to it but you're allowed to participate, it's certainly something that you should be identifying.
kind of on record that?
Just so everyone knows,
Thought
and,
about
and your
it.
other commissioners know as well, that
Yeah.
you may have these influences on you.
And I thought about it, and just letting you know.
What was the I'm sorry, the
Well,
scenario?
there's something coming up on Winchester, and I live in Winchester, and so I talked to him, and he was, glad you made
Oh.
it clear with the 1,000 foot. But I'm just saying, should I be proactive and say, look, I live there, I'm not influenced by distance or
Oh.
economically, but I just want to disclose that
I see what you're saying.
even though I'm not recusing myself, I am.
I see what you're saying.
So I
It
did.
seems like there's a point where you have to apply your own judgment too. I mean, if you feel
Yeah.
like you're gonna be
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
financially impacted, then you really go talk to council and
And
make
it's-
sure that you're.
It's all about a decision being made and then coming back later and going, hey, what about him? He lives there and he didn't, who do we know? But I've already disclosed it.
Yeah.
And,
So I will
You
say
know,
there
there
have
was
been
one time
times.
where I was on the Placer County Visitor Bureau, and there was a hotel that was being planned. And the hotel, if it was approved, would be, provide TOT tax to the county, which went to the Visitor Bureau. And on that one, probably I was okay if I stayed in the meeting, but personally, I thought, well, since I'm on the commission, on the Visitor Bureau, and they would benefit by this, then I recluse myself and left the room.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so that's an example of where, I don't know if that really would legally be required, but I felt like I needed to leave.
Yeah,
So-
it's a perception issue.
One thing that the board has done historically, is that when they have had something similar to that, they have announced that, it's not a conflict and that they have verified that through council. So that is always, that's always a good option to let people know that you acknowledged it. And it wasn't just your personal decision that you went, I determined I don't have this conflict. We actually had it
One more
looked
layer of
into in
protection
council.
and-
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that is one way that the board has handled it. And it does seem to be a best practice.
Okay.
And one other question, sorry, Hannah, I didn't mean to belabor this, but the conflict of interest isn't just your personal residence, correct? It would be any rental properties you own in the county? Okay.
Right. The exception only applies to your personal residence, though, to where you can participate.
Oh, gotcha. So if it's a rental property,
Then you would not be able to participate even if it was
okay,
close.
gotcha. Okay.
Or if you have stock.
Yeah, and
In the specific
one that has
company.
come up, which used to be a wobbler, but there's since been guidance that says it is in fact a conflict, is short-term rentals. And people that own short-term rentals, and then if your commission makes a decision on short-term rentals generally, the threshold is whether you're influenced more than a member of the public would be. And not every member of the public is a short-term rental owner. So in that instance, you do have a conflict if you're deciding something that's on short-term rentals and you're a short-term rental owner. And that was guidance that only came out in the past year, I think. So, just an instance to be aware of. And I know Hannah's got to leave in like three more
Go ahead, Hannah.
minutes. So.
Sorry.
Okay, so switching gears a little bit, Seth Lavina. So this act is specifically aimed at the concept of like pay-to-play advocacy. This is kind of your stereotypical situation where you have like a shady business person who's contributing amounts to a politician campaign with the expectation that, you know, they'll get a vote or a favorable decision. So specifically, what this act provides is that while a proceeding involving a license, permit, or other entitlement for use is pending, and for 12 months following the date of a final decision, a planning commissioner shall not accept, solicit, or direct a contribution of more than $500 from any party or participant in the proceeding. And just to note, this $500 amount is new as of January 1st. Previously, it had been set at $250, so there's a little more leeway here. A license, permit, or other entitlement for use includes land use licenses, permits, and other entitlements for land use, contracts, and franchises. However, what's not included are specific contracts, such as competitively bid contracts or contracts valued less than $50,000. And a proceeding is considered pending when an item involving the license, permit, or other entitlement is placed on the agenda for discussion or a decision to be made by the Planning Commission. It is also considered pending when an officer knows that the item involving the license, permit, or other entitlement is within the agency's jurisdiction and is reasonably likely to appear before that commissioner to make a decision on. And so this law would capture most of the decisions that the Planning Commission makes. Just like with the financial conflict of interest, where a commissioner determines that they have received a disqualifying contribution, there are certain requirements that must be met. Number one, you have to disclose it on the record, and number two, you can't be involved in the decision-making process for that decision. However, unlike the conflict of interest, you can still participate in certain circumstances or cure a violation. For those, the first instance is when your contribution of over $500 is received in the preceding 12 months, and as soon as you, you can still participate in that proceeding in making a decision if within 30 days of the time that you make the decision or know or should have known about the contribution, you return that contribution. The second instance where you can cure a violation is when you receive a greater than $500 contribution in the 12 months after a final decision has been made, and you return that contribution over the $500 within 30 days of the time that you have accepted, solicited, or directed the contribution to be made, whichever is last. And again, this compliance is important because the failure to do so could result in a voided decision, administrative, criminal, or civil sanctions.
Does this ever happen?
It does in political stuff.
Yeah,
you know, it
political.
Yeah,
You
but
know,
I'm
if
saying
you-
planning commissioners, like, hey,
If you're gonna
here's
run
$500
for office,
Yeah,
it's where it's happened before,
yeah,
and one of the applicants gives you a $500 donation.
Gotcha.
yeah.
It
What's
It
excluded,
happens with
though-
project applicants, but it's also any participants in the
Yeah.
meeting. So if you received $500 from a land use attorney, and that land use attorney comments at a meeting, then you then have violated the.
No one's even
the
offered me a
divine act.
piece of pizza. I can't even imagine.
This,
$500,
what's
I'd be shocked.
excluded, these are individual named people, what's excluded are independent expenditures, though, through a political action committee, that's, yeah. that's at the
I thought,
loophole,
wow,
yeah.
no one's offering me, they must
If
be
you're
lying.
running for an office and you're
Yeah.
accepting
I
political
see, I
contributions,
see.
this becomes
I see.
very
Yeah.
much in the forefront. But
Yeah.
you are also required under your Form 700 to
Sure.
disclose any gifts of $50 or more. And
Sure.
this could come up in that context too.
Sadly,
Right.
no.
And that 12-month clawback, that's from the date of the hearing, 12 months back, not a calendar year, correct?
Correct.
But the timing though is based on when it starts the application process, I'm assuming. So if some project goes in to be applied for, is that when you,
No, it's
When-
the date
No,
that you
it's the
decide
hearing.
on it.
it's the date
Yeah.
you decide,
And
okay.
we are
okay.
putting safeguards in place to just help make you aware of this,
Yeah.
and I don't know if that's what you were gonna talk about, but
Yeah,
initial project applications do have a Levine Act disclosure, so the applicant has to fill out whether they've contributed money as well. So we're
Oh,
trying to
that's
catch it on that
good.
side,
Yeah.
but we may not catch everything, so it would also be on your side too if you recognize somebody and.
and it's not just the applicant, it's any of the applicant's representatives that have participated in the that are
Right.
participating in the
So
project.
like their attorney,
Yeah, they're
Consultants.
engineers, they're, yeah.
okay.
And with that, that concludes my presentation. If you have any questions, please let us know.
Thanks, Hannah.
Thanks, Hannah.
We can call you if we have any specific little,
Absolutely.
okay. Thanks, Hannah.
So before we move back, anything else to cover in ethics or under the,
Megan, Kelsey's gonna send us the link so we can do
Yep.
our.
Yeah, so she'll send all of you the link to complete the training and then, or to submit a certificate if you've already completed. So you'll look for that in the next, probably early next week would be my guess. Is
and
when
then,
that'll come out. And then we will track it. So once we receive a certificate, we have a tracking system in place and then we will send you, a reminder probably 2 months before you're due to complete. That seems, to be a good time frame to give people 60 days.
Do all of your commissions do this? Like, you have a lot of commissions.
We do. It is the paid if you receive a stipend. That is the trigger for the ethics training is if you receive a stipend.
Got it.
Just one more comment on Code of Ethics. Thanks, Chris. There is a official Placer County Code of Ethics that's included as an appendix to the proposed procedures that is applicable to all county employees and county officials.
so definitely take a look at that, again, before this comes back, but it's attached as Appendix 1 to your procedure document. So let's spend a little bit of time then going through the procedures document and just maybe pointing out a couple of things that are noteworthy and maybe could generate some discussion. So, the document is structured in different sections. The first that we'll spend a moment just kind of talking about is Section 2, appointment, term of office, authority, and compensation. So one of the items that we highlighted for conversation is that there is under compensation, I think we all know that you are receiving a stipend and you're receiving your travel reimbursement, but wanted to create a little bit more of a parameter around your travel to investigate sites and look at projects. I know that I tend to see those. I know that when we were working on the rezone program, for example, I know a number of members spent quite a bit of time and drove around looking at all of the different sites, and there was a pretty, I don't know if I'd say significant, but there was there was certainly some cost around that. So what we wanted to propose is that if you are going to be traveling to visit sites and you are going to be claiming those miles, that you send me an email and let me know that that you're going out, you're going to be seeking reimbursement for for your mileage, so that I can authorize that, so that when we get the request for payment, so that you can be reimbursed for those costs, that I can sign off on that, because we're also kind of working through a change in just how we're processing your reimbursement request between my department, the Community Development Department, and the Clerk of the Board's office. So wanted to maybe pause there and just see if there's any thoughts about that or any conversation that the commissioners want to have about that.
Well, I guess for particularly new projects that are fairly large land projects, particularly on the west side, I don't find myself going very much up to the east side, some a little bit, but anyway, that's an important aspect sometimes to get a visual representative representation of the project that you're looking at.
Yeah.
Just as, you know, you have a visual image of what it is. We don't really go on the site, but we drive around and look at it. And so at any rate, I hope we don't discourage that.
Certainly not discouraging it. I think it's actually
supporting
a
it.
great benefit for members to do that, to, you know, kick the tires, if you will, of the site and, you know, get a good sense of it. So no, not trying to discourage in any way, just really trying to make sure that we have the proper documentation in place to be able to provide the reimbursements. So when we're questioned from finance about, you know, was this authorized, then there's that email chain that we can attach and where I've approved the travel.
Yeah.
Good.
It is to encourage it. The code is not 100%, like, it doesn't specify what commission business is. And so without this being in place, it's difficult for Chris or I to push that through, to say that, you know, you guys traveled to a site. And so we wanted to put something in place, in all honesty, to encourage that and
Okay.
give the ability, because, you know, gas and mileage, it's expensive, and, you know, you are working on commission business when you do that.
So, as a standard practice, I always go to every site. But I just, like in Granite Bay, I'll drive over there. It's like a couple miles. So I wouldn't think I would reimburse that versus I did go up to Palisades, and met with the MAC people ahead of time. So that probably would have been reimbursable. Like, what's
Absolutely would have been.
is everything, do we submit everything?
I mean,
or what's within
everything
reason?
technically is, I think it's when you're going to be requesting a reimbursement, then I ask that you email
Okay.
me.
Ahead of time.
Yeah.
Like
Okay.
during the rezone, Anthony went to every site. and
Yeah.
All over the county.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was really the one
Yeah, that
where
was the
there
one.
were some pretty
Yeah.
significant
Triggered
charges.
it, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a result of that. But I'd say that if you're, you know, if you choose not to seek a reimbursement for visiting some of the
Right.
sites that are proximate to
Okay.
you, then I wouldn't worry about it, obviously. But if you are going to request a reimbursement to travel to sites, just send me an email letting me know that you're planning on doing it,
Okay.
and then I'll send an approval.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay, moving on, the next stop is under 3, oath, chair and vice chair election and duties. So wanted to call attention to the chair, vice chair. Currently, we have a chair, vice chair, and secretary position that I believe is perhaps a bit outdated and obsolete because obviously the recording of minutes and all of the duties that are typically associated with the secretary position are being assumed by county staff. And so suggestion here, just because we do have the sort of the advancement process to become chair, of going from, you know, secretary to vice chair to chair, we still think that format makes sense, to have 3 executive officers, if you will. And so suggesting changing the secretary position to a second vice chair position.
Yeah.
So
Do you need a motion or just we like it?
head noddings and some affirmation is helpful.
Anybody opposed? Okay,
So we would be voting on this.
No, you
Right,
will
for
be
purposes of
eventually.
process, this is a
Generally.
working
Yeah.
document.
Yeah.
At some point, this will come back before the
Gotcha.
planning commission and then get formally adopted,
Gotcha.
but just, this is more working session
Yeah.
Because
today
we can
of
still
what do you
hold
like,
a
what do you
meeting.
don't
If
like.
the chair and the vice chair aren't there, there's a second chair, they can still hold a
Correct.
meeting because we'll still have quorum.
Yeah. Yep,
Yeah, that's happened before. where-
Mhm.
yeah, so having
Sometimes-
those three are
Yeah,
important.
there's, maybe sometimes you still have to find just the commissioner.
Sure, sure.
Since
Yeah,
you got four.
there have been
Yeah.
instances where we've ran out of all the chairs, and then we
You're like,
identified a
Just
chair
average.
for the day.
That's right. That's right. I'd also just point out the last, under subsection B, election chair, vice chair, you know, we went through this just with the last election of officers. But we've noted here that there is a rotation and that the clerk is going to maintain that rotation. We didn't attach it here. You know, the commission may choose to follow it, may choose not to follow it in the future. So just referencing it, but not attaching it. It's not going to be part of the formal documents. At least we're not recommending that it be.
Yeah, it helps to have that list though, because you kind of get lost if we deviate from it too much.
But then we changed, I was a commissioner in November, and I was supposed to be chair in January, and the group didn't think that was a good idea, so we moved it like 3 years, so it changed. So like, let's
Well-
say Trent was up for it next, and
Well,
then
we
he's
got,
moving
we
around.
got off track.
Right, on purpose, for a good
Well, I don't
reason.
know if it was on purpose, it was by
It was.
accident, but at any rate, there's been a traditional
Mhm.
process, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Mhm.
And what it does is it allows people to know basically when they're gonna be coming
Sure.
into the chair position.
Yep.
And so that's important for people to understand, and
For
we
sure.
got off track by manipulation, which we shouldn't have done, but we did it.
But
And
I think
so,
It is a-
To Robin's point, if I came in August and then I was in line and January 1, I'm chair, I wouldn't be real comfortable doing that.
I was
Uh,
happy to do it, they
Right.
didn't want me to do it.
It is a guidance document.
Sure, yeah.
There still needs a commission vote to determine it. And there have been prior instances, I remember Commissioner Sevison, he didn't have an interest in being the chair, but wanted to
Gotcha.
retain his vice chair status.
Gotcha.
And so really, this is guidance, and then if the commission decides that as a whole that you want to do something different, you're allowed to.
Gotcha.
So the general rule is we would still follow the rotation, second chair, vice chair, chair, but then depending on
1, 2, 3,
circumstances,
4. and
yeah,
then the
yeah,
others mixed in, yeah.
yep,
And
yep.
currently, it's Robin, Amber, then myself,
Correct.
as secretary now, second vice chair. correct?
Correct.
Yep,
Yep.
you've been promoted.
Get ready.
Yeah,
Then
practice.
hands on the key, treasurer.
You do.
Yeah.
So, and I think just one last thing on this, part of the, you know, like Clayton said, this is something you guys get to vote on, and we don't want to remove that piece.
Sure.
You know, it's
Yeah.
important to leave that, so that's part of the reason that we haven't included the rotation in it. We can always, as we look at that, we can always make sure that the commissioners are aware before moving into the vote of the chair, vice chair, and secretary.
Have you ever had a coup where they just can't stand the person and they just like,
Oh,
Here's the- I
next
have not,
year
and I
might
would
be,
like to not.
Kicked out of my seat.
just curious.
Maybe it'll be the first time.
Just curious.
I have not, and I do not want to experience it.
Are you gonna boot me out? Usurp my power.
You can have it back.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
So the next section is just largely the role of the role of county staff. So not going to spend time there, but spending a little bit of time maybe on meetings and meeting format. So a couple of things to note. We did make a modification to include that the meetings will be there will be a schedule that's approved, and the meeting times are 9 a.m. To reflect our revised meeting times. We lay out sort of the process, or the the main agenda topics on your agendas. One thing to note that came up at our last meeting, the way that we have it laid out here in this document isn't how the current agendas have been formatted. So you'll see here that the planning director report is above the general public comment. That was what we have been, what the way that the agendas have been formatted is with the public comments before, and that came up at our last meeting where Garabedian made a comment about providing comment after they heard my report. So you know, I think, Megan, we probably would, if the commission is amenable to it, kind of restructure
I
to
like
have
that.
this sort of format that's laid out here in this document. Other than that, there probably isn't much to talk about it in terms of the actual meeting format, unless there's
I have a question.
comments that commissioners have about that.
How does this filter down to the MACs? Because I was at a MAC meeting last night, and they have a new chair, and they have new MAC members, and they don't really have procedures. It was like this open forum thing, and public comment went here and there and everywhere, and it drives me absolutely crazy,
Oh.
because I want to control it. Do you do this for them, or I was gonna offer my services to them and train them on meeting procedures, because it makes
Yeah.
me insane.
There's MAC
I would
procedures.
just,
There's a book.
maybe I'll
So-
start and maybe others can go. But, you know, there is a board support services team at the county that does coordinate with the municipal advisory
They need
councils.
training.
And my understanding is that there is going to be a guidance document that's
Yes.
been that's being
They need
refined.
actual in-person training.
So just a little, the board has looked at that because the max, there's, I believe, 13 of them. And they've all kind of operated just slightly differently. And so what we looked at is like, we need to come into a uniformity for all 13 of them and get them into a place of, to be able to provide training and some guidance documents. We're changing some things and we're bringing the max that, they're governed by code, by Placer County Code, and what is brought forward to them. So we're in the process of that. It is in a transition period right now. There is a board support services team. They are taking, I don't want to say taking over the max, but they are gearing up to fully engage with the max to be able to provide things like training and formatting of agendas and minutes. So it's all the same across the board. We've built out, what their admin records will look like and all of those types of things. So it's a little bit rocky right now because there is also new appointments moving through on a multitude of max.
So would it be out of line for me to volunteer my services to walk them through what a meeting should look like? Or I should wait? And you all
I
do
would
it?
suggest waiting. Yeah, I would suggest waiting.
Because it's a free-for-all. They ask questions of the audience, they ask questions here, then they go there, and then they go there, and there's public comment is not timed, and it's just,
Yeah.
So at a base level, they have to comply with the Brown Act.
Sure,
But when it comes to procedures for a
Okay.
meeting,
they can do
there
what
is
they
a
want.
lot of discretion. And I would say historically,
Too much
each
discretion.
MAC, each municipal advisory council operated a little differently, had a different structure.
Okay,
And so that's kind of how it's resulted. They're all legally compliant, but have different styles for how they get there. And I think that's
Why
part of
not
the
make
effort is to try and
this-
centralize this and make it a little bit more uniform.
this would be good for them.
Mm-hmm.
So the group that's gonna do the thing and
Yeah,
do the
we
training and.
they are working through that, and it is. I think the other thing to Max are advisory, so they are we're trying to keep them in that realm. I guess that's the best way to put it. Is that we want them to be able to provide, because I can't remember the exact wording off the top of my head, but it's that they provide input on the projects.
They review and comment.
Review and comment on the projects is actually the way that it is worded in the MAC.
I'd
in the
also,
code.
I'd also just add that, as a result of perhaps some changes that we're making to the processes with the MACs, I will definitely be keeping you informed about those changes, about how planning interacts with the MACs, because that information, as you know, flows into your staff reports.
Right.
And how we communicate to you what was discussed at the MAC meetings and the general sentiment of the MAC's feelings about the project, we need to communicate to you. So if there are changes to that process, I'll be keeping you updated during our during the planning director report.
So the person that was there last night at the District 1 MAC, Sam?
Adam?
Adam. Yeah, poor thing. It just was nothing. I mean, it was, they didn't know when to dismiss him, they didn't know when to get comment, it was just such a mess, so I felt bad for him.
Basic Robert Rules of Order
But it doesn't-
issues.
And I think that with the MAC last
Wow,
night too, I did want to highlight, there was the staff that normally attends that had a family emergency. And so there was a little bit of that was
Oh,
occurring.
he did a good job. The MAC
No,
did
no,
a
I
bad
meant,
job.
no, I meant the person that would, not the Cedra staff, I meant on the board side, the staff that normally
Oh.
attends that. There was a family emergency, because normally there is a board staff person there that just sort of helps if they do get too far off track. And unfortunately, last night, that
I had
wasn't.
to ask them when they were closing this and when they were opening that, and I'm just sitting there. I'm like, can they leave? Are they done?
You know, one thing I would say is, as planning commissioners, I don't think we should try to influence the MAC process, because that's being influenced by the county. And so I would say that, I would say not do it. You know, maybe the MAC's gonna be individual in the way they operate, but
Oh, I
that's the way they
disagree.
operate, and the county will control that.
And historically,
And then
if
the
you
other
look at-
question I have is, I'm hearing that the MACs are no longer gonna be taking votes. Is that accurate?
Undecided currently, but, you know, as was just mentioned, what our code says that they will do is they will review and provide comment on projects. It doesn't speak to them taking any action on the project. So we're working through that process, and again, that will then lead into how we as staff present that information to you. If they don't take action on them, we will then communicate to you what comments were received by the MACs.
Now, the code itself talks about land use type issues, but the MACs frequently, you know, they have CHP, they used to have the Forest Service. I
We are
used to go when I was
separating
with the
those
Forest
now.
Service. And that's an important function for the county.
Sure.
I would say that should continue, but I don't know.
So there's no desire to remove that. That is 100%. They still want to to keep those updates, because they are.
That's why
They're
people
really,
come.
yeah, they're really great updates. So, I believe, and again, this is all still transitioning out, but I believe they're going to bifurcate, and there will be a MAC meeting that deals with what the MAC is actually charged with dealing with under the code. And then there will be a district forum or a community forum where.
We did that last night.
Yes.
6 to 6:30 was the police, sheriff,
Mm-hmm.
and their report outs on the community, and then the MAC meeting started at
Yep.
6:30.
So they're still going to continue it. We're just not tying it into the Brown Act portion of the MAC, because it's not part of what the
Right.
code requires. The other thing is that there is, you know, Brown Act has requirements for an administrative record for if you have things that are in a meeting, and, you know, so when they come and they give the statistical report out and things like that, that all has to be captured in the record, and it's not, you know, I mean, these MACs, my office is not clerking them, they're being clerked by basically volunteers. And so they're not, you know, they're not clerks, and they may not be capturing all of that, and we want to make sure that our records are.
Who with the county is working on the process? Is that you?
It is, I am providing input on it. I am trying not to have too much of an onus on it. It really is the CEO direction. So we received direction at a workshop of the board, and now we're moving forward, and it is, the CEO is getting input from county counsel's office, my office, and then working with the board support services team and Cedars team.
Yeah, I guess what I would ask then is, for people that are concerned about not being able to vote anymore, who should they talk to?
Those should go directly to their supervisor,
To who?
to the supervisors.
To the supervisors?
Yes.
Okay. Thank
Yeah.
you.
While we're on this topic, and while I mentioned, you know, these process changes could result in maybe a bit of a change in how we communicate the information in our staff reports. Just to, you know, even though it's not included in your procedure document, just a quick touch point on just how our reports, how you find our reports, and the information that's contained in them. We continue to make, you know, we continue to tinker a bit just with the format. I think we are going to maybe launch into a little bit of a template change to our staff reports, just moving some things around, making it a little bit more readable. But just, wondering if there's any general feedback that the commission has just on the information and the way that it's formatted and the amount of information provided to you.
I find the presentation super helpful.
Mhm.
So I read the report, I skim the report, and then when I get the presentation, it informs my thought process better, and then I go back to the report to verify what I'm thinking. So they come later, I understand why.
Sure.
But I need that, and we didn't have that when I first started. The other thing is a request, and I don't know if this has happened or not, a request to change the word entitlements to requested entitlements, because it bothers some people.
Mhm.
You're not entitled to this, you're requesting to be entitled to this. So instead of the header on the subject to be entitlements, make it requested entitlements. And that was my only thing. But yeah, the staff reports are meaty and science, data driven, and the presentations are so helpful.
Getting back to the meetings, kind of simple question. Let's say we've got 4 agenda items, we're all busy with outside lives, and we act on 2 of the items, and I get an emergency phone call and I gotta leave. I'm not anticipating that's gonna happen, but it's come close a couple times. And do I blow up the whole meeting then, or can I leave, or does it discount the 2 items we've already decided on?
So
As long as we have a
there's
quorum.
Yep.
As long as there's quorum, you can just get up and leave. You don't need to say anything about it.
Like the last meeting, we couldn't go to the bathroom because there were only 4 of us.
Yes.
So you have to
That's
make a reason. Yeah.
If we ever drop below quorum, everything stops at that moment.
right.
So if we do have 4 people, then everyone's got to
But
be there.
even,
But
even then, if, in my example, the first 2 items decided on
Would still stand.
Would still stand.
Yeah.
Okay, I just was curious on that. And then getting up in the middle of an issue and going to the restroom or whatever, that's
totally fine.
perfectly okay.
There is an optics component to that.
Yeah.
Sometimes if you leave for a project that's in your district, you may get members of the public that send emails
Sure,
or comments in. So to the extent that there is a break and you can say, I've got to leave early for a pre-scheduled appointment, so I'm getting up now, it may just kind of help smooth that over,
Sure.
but legally you can get up at any point.
Sure, okay.
I will thank you for the 9 o'clock starts. It's
Oh,
made my
good.
life so much easier. Thank you.
I think
I'm
it's
glad
made
that
all of
that's-
ours.
yeah,
I think it's
I'm
made
glad
all
it's
of
helping.
ours.
I'm sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was a good transition. I think one other thing, just on that note, for the larger items, Chris and I do talk and try to plan in, a break when we know that you're going to be sitting there for a very long time, because like Clayton said, we do look at the optics of that. And so him and I do, when we know we have a big one coming, we go, okay, how are we going to time in to make sure that everybody gets a few minutes to just stand up, stretch their legs, use the restroom, whatnot.
And
Especially the optics during public comment,
Not
right?
checking
I
out
mean,
Chris.
leaving during staff presentation or something that might be a little bit
Yeah.
more appropriate, but public comment is.
And I've checked with Chris, because there was one
doesn't
where I
look
had
good.
an unavoidable
Yeah.
3 PM, and he said, hey, we won't get there, and
Yeah.
problem solved. But, no, I was just curious if it blew up the rest of the meeting, or if it,
Nope.
Yeah, unless you're in the Palisade meeting and it becomes urgent.
Sure.
I would
For
also
those-
say that people shouldn't be using their cell phone while they're at the dais, unless you need to check the time. I think that doesn't look good either,
So, and on the Public Record Act side of that, to the public, it looks like you're texting about the project. So we
Yes.
have gotten Public Records Act
Exactly.
requests for whatever
Yeah.
was being communicated, that we've had to follow up on.
Yeah.
So just be aware of that.
Yeah,
On the bigger, more contentious projects, where we have 6, 7, 8 hours that the commission's gonna be sitting, on those ones, I think a large part of quelling that public opposition to breaks is just giving them a heads up in
Yes.
advance. So certainly that's the chair, but I guess to all of you, if we can map out the day beforehand, that saves
Right.
some resentment. We do get a lot of issues when public is waiting to comment, and
Sure.
then we go through 3 hours, and then we're like, hey, we're taking a half-hour break, and they thought
Right.
they were getting up to provide their input, and now it's delayed another half
Hey,
hour.
Chris, will
Yeah.
you add that to the speaker notes for the next meeting, because it's gonna be an all-dayer?
Some
I
speaker.
agree
yeah.
with you completely. However, I have used this to fact check once in a while when
Yeah.
someone in the public, in fact, I remember specifically the farmer saying that when lead shot came
Oh, I
into
remember
effect,
that.
I remember.
came into effect, and he was right. I went,
I remember
Yeah.
that.
took a look and,
Yeah, I periodically use mine too, because sometimes I put notes on
But
my,
the
but
optic-
definitely excessive use of it in
Yeah.
like sound
I
is
think
not good.
I
Yeah.
think the optics of it.
So I
Yeah,
will say one,
exactly.
like to your point, we just had this in a board meeting, Supervisor, DeMattei used his phone to look at, a website that was there was a presentation. And so what he did is after that, he said, I just looked it up on my phone, which let everybody know, you know.
Yeah.
So there's that option too. I mean, like Clayton said, there is the PRA aspect of it. I think, you know, we've all gotten so used to phones and we don't, you know, always think about it and we're all multitasking, but this is one of those times where the public, the perception is that we're not listening, even if it is something that you are fact checking for the meeting or full engagement, so it's a good point.
What's the process to allow participant or citizens to film us? The Facebooks?
We do
Facebook.
not, our rule, our policy is that as long as they are not, their filming does not block other members of the public from being able to view and participate in the meeting, and that it doesn't block any of our cameras that are live streaming.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
And we've
Yeah,
had that
and
recently at,
we have.
I'm
Yeah.
trying to remember
There
which
there
meeting
is
it
a
was. but
First
we've had
Amendment
that.
right for people in public meetings to video.
yeah, so we
So,
have no,
the limitations are, yeah, if they're blocking other members of the public, they have to stay kind of behind the dais. And also, there is a concern over privileged documents or privileged interactions. They can't be, so we don't allow them to video from behind where council would be or where you may have privileged documents up, those kind of things. So they are limited to the
The
public.
next time I'll
area.
just hold them up like this.
Yes. Just do
The
that.
ARD guy decides to film me.
Vote
during
no,
the-
vote yes.
And
Yeah.
we have had instances where people have filmed and
Mhm.
then used technology to zoom in on those
Mhm.
documents.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
So just be
Yeah.
aware of all of that.
He just wanted to make fun of me, called me names online, so it was very nice. A great
Oh,
day.
no.
That was in the back.
I had one, George, did you have a question earlier?
No, it was,
Okay.
I was just gonna make a comment on the MAC, going back to just, you know, we have 13 or 14, sometimes it was 12, but 3 of that 13 are pretty active and have
Yeah.
a lot of conversation and a lot of people from the public there. The other 10 are pretty mild, and it gave us that flexibility as the chair for many years. It gave you the flexibility to make decisions on how the communications were gonna go. I would ask the presenter early on, do you want to take questions direct, or do you want to wait until after your presentation? How would you like to do that? And in many cases, when there were information, non-action items, just presentations, they would say, yeah, if they've got a question, I'll go ahead and take it. And so it just gives you the ability to let the public feel involved. They didn't feel like our meetings and the supervisors' meetings so structured, and you really got to be very careful because you are making final decisions. Where there, you were making recommendations only, so it just allowed the public to be involved, and they felt more comfortable. Maybe the attendance was up a little bit because they felt more like they were actually getting something and they were being involved, versus those, Forest Hill, yours, Mac, become very active and somewhat contentious, and there was a lot of conversation going on.
Mine too.
Yeah.
If they want to try and do it that way, that's fine, but they try and do it our way and they don't do it right.
Right,
That's what drives me nuts.
Robin's like, pick away.
Just pick away, and I'll go with it.
Just observe,
Just
be
observe.
happy.
That's not
Yeah.
possible, but.
I had a question and then a comment on the staff reports that you'd asked for input. So for this sequence, that makes sense. With the general public comments not on the agenda, can they then comment on the commissioner report and planning director report? Because I think that was the issue that came up last meeting. So in
Yeah.
that, are those considered on the agenda though,
Good
then?
question.
Does that make sense?
So there isn't a public comment portion for the planning director reports or planning commissioner
Is
reports.
not.
So that's not listed on the agenda, so even if there was a discussion,
Okay.
comment about it, they could still raise that during the general public comment.
They can.
And that's why by
Okay.
putting it after, so they
Okay.
hear my report, they hear your reports, and then by doing public comment after that, then they would have an opportunity to provide
Just-
within their 3-minute.
But then when would you
Okay.
address, when would you answer the question? If there's a general question,
I think then you can direct it
To you.
to me or we can just respond.
And for Brown Act purposes, you are allowed a brief discussion about it. There's no definition of what that is, but maybe one question, one answer.
Yeah.
Anything beyond that has to get agendized.
Yeah.
Right.
So a good recommendation for things like that, and again, I'll use the board as an example. We just had this at the last board meeting. A gentleman of the public got up and he had a very specific comment to short-term rentals and the handling of those in Tahoe. Supervisor Gore said, we can't address your topic. There's a staff person that we will connect you with and get a card to.
Gotcha.
So you can always do things like that to say, we hear your comments, we will ensure that staff follows up afterwards
Gotcha.
with that. And that's always a good way to handle it, because we are limited and it's not spelled out how far we can engage in those responses.
Okay.
And then just on this, you asked about the input. I have a kind of a similar rubric as Robin. I scan the staff report, and then when I get the PowerPoint, I like that too. One thing, and I think it's done sometimes, but one thing that I find really helpful, and I ended up doing this with you guys beforehand usually, is obviously for large projects, every single public comment, you can't do a tit for tat response, but it is super helpful to have key themes of public comments or specific, totally legit, valid questions that when sometimes the staff will prepare, they'll go say, someone said, can they access this project through a different right of way, just as an example. Having staff say, hey, we looked at that, or here was a comment and here's the reason why or why not. I try to do some of those responses, but if there's any way to maybe just consider that, having a summary. I think you guys sometimes do the summary public comment, but sometimes saying, this is what we looked at, or this is the reason that isn't possible, I think helps people feel heard, and then also that you've addressed a lot of the
And
comments.
they do that in the EIR, when they get the EIR.
Right, yes.
It's great for the EIR. It also helps us not ask you the question in the meeting.
Sure.
Right.
Where you might get different answers, that way it's just already done. I don't have to ask that question. I had a question when I started. Oh,
Right.
check.
It's
And I don't
done,
have to ask.
exactly, yeah, in the EIR, but then not on the
Correct, staff
project
reports.
questions, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah, that's helpful.
Yeah, but otherwise, I think they're great. The staff reports to me are
Top notch.
they're top notch, and they have good reference, and then I can go to the section or the development agreement, and you guys are always super helpful, especially when I have questions on something specific. Either Clayton or you are go to this section in the EIR, so I don't have to read the hundreds of pages, so
Yeah.
super helpful.
And Trent, this will be helpful for you. When you're going through the packages beforehand, if you have any questions, technical questions, things you don't understand, I have engineering questions I don't know and I don't understand, get to staff beforehand. And even if you have a question in the meeting, still bring it up. Because
Yeah.
sometimes it's edifying for all of us, but they're a great resource before the meeting if you have questions.
Yeah.
And I think just on that too, I know I've mentioned it before, but we really appreciate those technical questions beforehand, because otherwise then we're
Scrambling.
scrolling through the documents, and we want to make sure you have all the information that you need, so
Yeah.
it gives us a little extra time to find the correct site or resource.
And there's also been times where, because of the questions that have come up, we've asked additional technical staff to attend the meetings.
Right.
Or brought in, maybe we need to have the environmental consultant at the meeting to answer questions.
Like Palisades, that was so well done, you guys. I
Yeah.
think that
That was
was
very well done.
remarkable how you had it like that.
Yeah, so, but knowing those questions in advance allows us to have the right team
Right.
in place.
I think on that note as well, it's important to point out, just because you've asked the question beforehand doesn't mean that we don't expect you. We expect it to be asked and addressed in the meeting as well, and we understand that there are times that you're asking the question so you understand it, and then bringing it up again at the dais so that the public gets to hear that answer as
Yep.
well. And it is, it's just make sure that we have the ability to do that really well.
Yeah, sometimes ask questions just so the public knows.
Exactly.
That I know that you know that you know.
Exactly, that's why
So you know.
that's why I was saying the
Yeah.
summary of, and then response,
Exactly.
yeah, exactly.
One thing that I'm thinking about, looking at the questions that come up at the meeting, is what the document here talks about is questions or comments. And you know, the questions part I understand, because it's something you don't understand, or maybe the public doesn't understand, which is helpful to get an answer from the staff. But the comments part is, so I can see where comments would fit in there, but at least from my experience, when the commission gets off the rail is when a question is asked and there becomes a discussion over it amongst the commissioners, or further questioning on it. And what's really happening is, you know, the public is viewing the commissioners already have their mind made up when we get too deeply into the subject. And so at any rate, what I would recommend is, you know, if you have a question, ask a question. But if you don't really get the answer that you are anticipating, you know, there's plenty of time and discussion to pursue it to the extent that you want. But basically, if it gets to the point where you're starting to disclose your opinion,
Right.
then that becomes a danger zone for the public. And the reason I say that is the public input is really important. And basically, if the public has a feeling that we already have our mind made up,
Yeah.
then a lot of the people may not want to get up and make a comment. And so I've seen this happen before, where we got off the rail with discussion before the public comment. And so at least from my perspective, I'd caution us about that in the future. And ask your question and say thank you, and then we'll go on, you know. But
Yeah.
if you didn't get the answer that you wanted, then discuss it later.
So
That's
then the
what I
thought
would
would be that I didn't number these bullets here under hearing agenda number 6, but the comment would be to, you know, like under that second bullet, it's commission questions to planning staff rather than
Yeah.
comments.
The comments are
Yeah.
question what we're talking about.
Similarly,
Clarifying
under
questions versus.
Bullet five.
versus sort of your
comments.
deliberations and
Yeah.
providing
I
your
agree with that.
your perspective on the project or making
Right.
comments about the project that
So
would be
bullet five,
later.
take out or comments.
Correct.
Bullet 5.
Bullet five. I'm
No,
just-
Bullet
bullet
seven,
2.
actually.
Well, bullet
Bullet
2 and bullet 5.
And five.
Oh. No, we can do comments.
Oh, we can do comments and
Yeah.
questions on
Well,
five.
so yeah, I think, because typically the order is the presentation, commissioner questions,
Yeah.
public comment, and then that's really when the commission enters into deliberation.
Why don't
at
we
that
just call
point.
bullet five commission deliberations? Because you can still ask questions
You-
in
yeah,
deliberations.
both.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and make comments. So let's just call it commission deliberations.
Uh-huh.
But as part of that process, normally after the public comment, a lot of times, especially with the larger issue, staff will then convene and answer those public comments, right?
Yeah, we'd probably move number 6
Oh.
up and
Yeah.
number 6 would become number 5.
Yeah.
Because that helps us.
Absolutely.
That
yeah.
helps us.
Yeah, I see what you're saying.
And
Wonderful.
Oh,
Yeah,
But
that
even,
happens before it comes back.
but
to
even
us.
when you guys are answering the public's questions, if we want to chime in, it's just a question. And
Right.
then we'll deliberate later.
Yeah.
That's final.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, that helps us.
That makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. we can
And it
move-
is, you know, one of the things, like we talked about optics, Chris and I always, like with Palisades, we timed the breaks, because what we don't like to do is, once the commission enters into deliberation, we want to go deliberation and vote with no breaks. That is always our goal.
Yeah.
Once that's happened, once you guys have started talking about deliberation, what we don't, and it, you know, it can't always be avoided, but the optics is we know, we'd like you to remain on the dais
Sure.
until the vote is made.
Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, that's good. Let's see, we did put a bullet here down for motions, recusals. Was there anything else we wanted to cover on that? I know we already talked a little bit about recusals. Anything else on motions?
You guys all do a really wonderful job of this. I will just say, you know, anytime you're speaking, even on a motion, having your mic on is, you know, it's just always a reminder that we like to give. I know that, you know, just to say your name sometime, it's a problem. But the reasoning behind it is that anyone watching on YouTube, if your mic is not on, they do not hear your vote. So
Right.
while we hear it, it's sitting there in the room. So just, like I said, you guys all do great. Just as a reminder, even when you're making your
And do you have a panel that shows that our mic is on? Okay.
a couple other things on the motions that some of you may be aware of, most of you should be aware of. Once a motion is made, then we have to vote on that motion. If you do get to the instance that a motion is made, we can't actually take a second motion on top of that until the first motion's resolved. So
You can amend the motion
Which
while
you
you're.
can amend.
right, but it's up to the person making the motion. I know a lot of times we've had, hey, consider this, consider this. It really is the person making the motion, whether they want to change it or not. And if they don't want to, that's fine. We still need to vote and decide on that motion before moving to the next motion. And also, too, sometimes and I don't know that this has happened on our commission, but sometimes you get into that deliberation and a lot of discussion, and then there's kind of this lull about, okay, what's next? Sometimes, especially if you've got a split on the commission, sometimes there's a benefit to making a motion and getting out there with a motion so that you can kind of get a feel for where everyone
Like
is.
a straw poll, yeah, yeah.
And we have done before, it's certainly possible, you can do tentative motions on things, kind of tentative, where are you on this issue? Because that issue then formulates where we're gonna be on the entire project. So that's a way to kind of break it up too, especially if it's a giant project like Palisades or something like that, where you wanna see where people might be on the portion of it.
Sure. I think it's also up to the chair to say, do I hear a motion? Do I hear a motion here in this discussion? Does somebody want to raise one? They do, they do. If they don't, they don't.
Yes, I've heard the term bifurcate. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, similar to that, yeah.
Now, there's those instances where you will read the motion in versus us, and I've always kind of wondered the public's perception of that the county's kind of shoving this versus the commission, so
Well, and we're also-
I don't care, it makes it a lot easier on us
Yeah,
just to
so-
go.
Well, and
agree.
we're also
why didn't
reading
somebody read
we're
mine?
also reading it in as part of our staff presentation too, right? So we're
Right.
going over the motion, or we're going over the actions as part of our staff presentation and reading it in verbatim as
Right.
well.
So the requirement is the motion needs to be read in. Once it's read into the record, even if it's as a recommendation, then you can move and say, I move for item 1, or item 2, or item 3.
As read into the record
As
by
read.
Mr. Blah Blah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where I do read into, where I end up taking it sometimes is that we've had some sort of edit to the project during the way, or maybe staff had an edit to a condition of approval, so now and they did that on the fly during the meeting, so now we've got to tweak things. So usually I do that just so you don't have to go through the hassle of reading through that entire thing, but there is kind of an optics component.
Yeah,
and
yeah, that's.
if there's a better way,
it's
we
much
can
easier
handle
on
it.
us.
But
Yeah.
if there aren't any changes to any of the actions, it would be appropriate for whoever's making the motion to just reference the
Sure.
Yeah,
Actions
and
already
state
there.
as read in by whichever staff member, or you could even just say by staff.
And there is a question that comes up with motions all the time, and that is, do you take the whole project as one motion, or is each one as separate motions?
Right.
The general rule for that is, if there is any hint of opposition that has come up during the discussion to any portion of the project, then they should go as separate motions, so that your commission and each of you has the potential right to vote yes to part of it and no to part of it.
And we've had that.
So,
And we usually ask you, would you like us to do these individually?
right,
or would you
and
like us to do these
yeah, if
collectively?
there's any hint of it, my suggestion will always be take them as separate motions, just to make sure that you each have the right to then say no to a portion of the project instead of the other. But that's
a good,
the general
good
guideline.
optics if we just run with that,
And we
read
had
each
that
one of
happen
them
where
independently, so we're
we
not,
5-3
do
or
we need to do this? It's like
6-1,
we don't know what
5-3,
we're
or,
doing.
you know, whatever, 5-3,
Right.
5-2.
And I think the
Yeah.
ranch had, when that one got decided, there was, for each
Yeah.
separate item, there
Yeah,
were
it
different
was.
votes on it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that really helped in terms of seeing what people's concerns were with the issues.
Right.
Why on the board do you do all in favor and all opposed, and we do roll call vote?
So roll call is
That's a good
required
question.
if there was any telephonic appearance, and that's, so that's kind of where
Oh.
it came from. With everyone in person, there is a bit of an option to it. For me personally, if there's any chance of a split, it's a lot easier to do the roll call, because then we know where the no is or the yes is, and are able to track that.
Okay,
So I think it makes more sense. It's a little bit easier to do it on the roll call vote
fine.
So
side
I-
of things, but
We're
it's,
used to
there is a
that.
bit of a
Yeah.
preference to it.
I will say on part of it with the board, so the board does roll call, like Clayton said, if we have a remote attendance, that would automatically cue us into a roll call. We also roll call on certain items that require, that we have four members present in order to take the item. Budget revisions are one of those that we have to roll call those. So
Okay.
that's what the board is roll calling. The other piece to it is there's just a lot of items on the board agenda, and to get into a roll call when you're voting on, that many, and it just is long. And if we were to roll call everything on the ones they take individually, just their agenda tends to be heavier than yours. So they have opted not to. We do record their minutes. They're on our summary action, and our minutes does record each individual member's vote.
Oh,
So that is always listed,
gotcha.
it
If
doesn't.
there was a nay, then
If
you'll
there was,
say,
yep,
okay,
we list out the exact vote of each member,
gotcha.
on the summary in the minutes. So even though they don't do a roll call, it's still shown that way.
Cool.
Is there a formality whether to say yes or aye, or does it
Personal
matter?
preference.
Okay.
Either one works. But something that did come up in one of the last meetings, if you recuse, you
I-
should say recuse instead of
Abstain.
absent.
Abstain.
Yeah.
I heard that
abstain,
too.
yeah.
That's what I was wondering. Is
Yeah,
there?
abstain would be preferred over
Yeah.
absent.
Yeah.
And from here on out, the internet connection is only for reasonable accommodation?
So the Zoom portion is only for
Zoom.
reasonable accommodation. So, we still do live stream to YouTube. That is still occurring, so people are still able to watch it remotely. It's
Watching it, but as far as public comment.
Public
or
comment is
Reasonable accommodation only,
reasonable
not
accommodation on
phone.
Zoom.
I
Zoom
will
has
also-
a phone option, so if they, we are doing reasonable accommodations per the request. So I think that's the best way to put it, is that depending on how the request comes in, will depend on what the accommodation.
Is there a link for the request? How do they know how to request?
So any request can be made to, they can send that request in really to anyone.
But I, a
The-
member of the public, I have no idea. Is
So
there
The
something
agenda
else?
includes
The agenda
something at
includes-
the top
I
of
was gonna
that
say, it
has
includes-
contact information and explains how the accommodation request
So
should be
for
made.
planning commission, it comes to,
Gotcha.
all of it ends up filtering to our office, but we have it listed on our website on the agenda, but really they can make the request to anyone. And if you were to hear a request, if you're out and you're talking to someone in the public, please be sure that you inform us that somebody made that statement to you.
Yeah.
Let my office know, and we will make sure to get in contact with them.
I will also just mention, since we're talking about the Zoom platform and changes that we might be making as a result of not using that for public comment, is that, we probably won't really change our process in terms of when we decide to hold meetings in Tahoe. I think, as I mentioned earlier, we have an item coming up. There's a chance that there might be some public comment on it, so we're going to hold that meeting in Tahoe, similar to how we've conducted business in the past. However, when we do have items that might be of countywide interest, so particularly like the general plan update, items like that, then we will be utilizing the same approach that the board has been, where we set up a room at our office in Tahoe City for the public to go and provide comment, and we'll be working with the clerk's office so that when it is time for public comment, we'll take public comment from people that are in the room with us, likely here in Auburn, and then we'll see if there's any public comment in the Tahoe City office too. And then you'll be hearing that via, I don't know if it's Zoom or what.
Just like an
Platform.
overflow room.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and it came about, we started it actually long before COVID. We had the Tahoe office comment. As everybody knows, 80 is typically either has snow on it or it's under road construction. And so that's really the reasoning for it, is that to gauge your ability to drive down and make it to a meeting in Auburn at a specific time to give comments is completely dependent on what's happening on 80, and that changes every day. So that's why we started it. Obviously, then during COVID, everything transitioned, and then with the transition out of Zoom, we brought it back to ensure that our Tahoe residents are still able to attend and participate.
Yeah, so it won't be every meeting that we have that set up, but again, when there's the need to, we will do that.
And that'll show on the agenda, so we'll know that it's happening.
Yes.
Yeah, and I'll make sure to put it in the chair notes as well, so that there's a reminder to check with the clerk to see if there's anyone in attendance in Tahoe to provide comment. Yep.
One exception to that is the next planning commission meeting, I think on the 27th, will be by Zoom, and the reason for that is it was noticed as such before the switch, so there will be one meeting that will be by Zoom.
Okay. You're confusing us.
Let's see, is there anything else on motions, or we do have a section here on disorderly conduct. I know that that's come up on occasion fairly recently as well. So
Yeah, I can speak a little bit to this one. If somebody is disrupting to the meeting to a level that it can't continue, there is an ability to remove them from the meeting. That does require first, though, that they be warned that they need to stop their conduct, or else they will be removed. And then if they continue after that, then you are able to remove them. I will say, anytime somebody has been removed from a meeting, we expect we're getting a lawsuit based on infringement of First Amendment rights. So that's something that I suggest we use as a last resort. Probably the best move is to take a 5-minute break, clear the room. We'll discuss, does it make more sense to continue the meeting, all of those kind of options before we pull somebody out. But that is available if needed. And part of the reasons when we think, that's part of the reason that we kind of have it set up that way.
It's a side comment on the House of Representatives. Recently, there was a disruption, and he called a 5-minute recess. So I thought, oh, this works all the way up the chain.
It does.
This is a,
Well, if
So-
you ever watch Sac
common
County
practice.
commissioner meetings, they have a guy that jumps up on the table.
Yes.
And they always get off the dais.
as long as they don't throw shoes at you, you're all right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, it was interesting. We had we met with the sheriff's office because obviously, during COVID, we had kind of all sides with a lot of frustration. And so that was their recommendation is they said, if you leave the room, it just takes away. And we did it, and it was, we had one particular meeting where it was getting, the audience was starting to yell out, and Supervisor Wygant just said, okay, we're going to take a 5-minute break. You have to actually leave, though, because the board members are like, okay, and they just sort of stayed. We're like, no, you have to, you guys,
Commissioners on the
you
dais.
gotta walk out, guys. But when we came back in, it was just like,
Takes the wind out of their
it was
sails.
totally different audience when we walked back in.
Yeah.
So it is a good one. To Clayton's point, if there is a disruption and, we have, we do at times have deputies, and that's if we've had somebody who has made comments of more of a threatening nature, or, then we will. Or if we know that we're gonna have a certain threshold of just public, then the deputies tend to.
It makes a huge difference. Having a uniformed officer in there, people just
It
are
does.
on their best behavior.
But what I will say is that if the uniformed officer is there, like Clayton said, we have to give the member of the public a lot of options to
Sure.
correct their behavior, but also the deputies cannot engage unless requested to. So I
that
think
was my
that's
next
a
question.
really
Okay.
important.
Has it ever happened where you've taken somebody out?
I think the closest we've got is we did have a deputy stand
Yeah.
up by the lectern.
That is
at
the
one
closest it's ever been in my years here.
I saw one probably 15 years ago. Actually, it was Harriet White as
That was more than 15
before.
then.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I guess.
You're aging
probably
us both here, George.
25, yes, where she instructed the officer to do his bleeping job and remove that individual.
Yeah. But
But that was Harriet.
Yeah.
You know Harriet.
Clayton said, please don't do that.
That-
Please, whatever you do, don't do that.
Usually where people misbehave is after you close the public comment.
Yeah.
Right.
And somebody will want to comment.
yeah.
Yep.
And if you don't let them, oftentimes they'll slam the wall or slam their chair and leave the room.
Or just talk over.
But that's okay.
Yeah.
On sort of the note of conduct, I think the other thing to remember is that treating everybody equally, and that is not always, when people continue speaking over their 3 minutes, it's hard to cut them off. I know that, and they can ignore it, but if everybody in the room feels that they were treated equally and told at their 3-minute mark, like, thank you for your comments, it's up and you need to sit down, it does increase the frustration if certain people are allowed to talk longer than others. That definitely increases the frustration, and so I would say just in avoiding that, it's really good practice to, at the 3-minute mark, let people know that their time is up and ask them to sit back down.
And then cut their mic.
Yeah.
The same comes also with people that have commented and then stand back up and want to provide additional comments or a second comment period or ask a supplemental question.
Well, that's why I would like in the speaker notes, in the chair notes, to have a rule, 1 sentence, 2 sentences. A lot of people don't know you only get 1 shot at the apple. They don't know that 3 minutes is the only 3 minutes you get. For example, the
Well,
gentleman who.
the chairman needs to know that because.
Right.
Because if you give somebody a second bite at the apple, you
You
have
have
to
to
give
give
everybody.
everybody a second bite of the apple. So it would be good to have, everybody gets 1 opportunity to speak, you will get 3 minutes, just something really short. Because I don't think that gentleman knew that he couldn't come back up and have a second question or a second chance.
Well,
on it.
there's a lot of them are gonna do that.
Yeah, and they just don't know. I mean, I wouldn't know if I hadn't been.
I can
part of it.
include that.
Yeah.
No, you can announce it as a chairman.
Yeah, he's gonna add that to the,
Huh?
he's gonna add that to the speaker note, to the chairman's notes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All I know is ARD member Holbrook knew that he had spoken, and he came back up, and they filmed me because I rolled my eyes, and they
Oh,
called
no.
me Chairman Eye Roller on everything in the world on Facebook.
Oh, that's hilarious.
One of the things that, we
Yes,
used,
always
we
assume
used
you will be
to,
videoed and it will be used
at one time, we used
against you.
to, if somebody represented an organization, they could have more time,
Yeah, that was in here.
but that no longer applies.
I thought that was in here.
So,
Everybody
Oh.
gets
You wanna
3
take
minutes.
it?
go ahead.
It used to be
Okay,
5
so
minutes.
here's
It
the
used to be 5
challenge.
for the org.
No, everybody gets 3 minutes now, I believe.
So
right?
here's the challenge to this, is that, we would say if you're representing an organization, you can speak for 5 minutes. What we did not have is we didn't have rules that you had to then submit to prevent others from speaking. So what was happening is somebody was saying, I'm speaking on behalf of this organization, and I'm gonna take 5 or whatever extended amount of time they got. And then every other member from the organization would speak at 3 minutes.
Like the purple shirts up in.
And
top.
so what was happening is that we weren't, then they were speaking as individuals, and so we couldn't prevent that. Because we can't tell you that you can't speak as an individual and as the organization. So what we have done is it is at the discretion of the chair. There is still that ability to grant extra time if that time is requested. We have actually just, because of a couple other issues that are coming forward, there's been some conversations amongst the Clerks Association where they are looking, like the other county is one of them, I think it was San Diego. Their policy is that you have to speak on behalf of a certain number of people and you have to submit those names, and then those people have to waive their right to
Oh.
speak as individuals.
That's complicated.
And so for us, it's what we have found is just letting everybody speak is the best practice. And again, the chair always has the discretion to
So
extend
3
it.
minutes for each person then.
3 minutes for each person, and if they want to request an extension, we would work with the chair on
Or what
that.
if they wanna concede their time to the gentleman behind them? I hate that, cause who's
We're
blocking
not.
that?
Yeah, that doesn't,
Okay.
it's not really
Works
easily to
against
enforce.
treating everyone equally.
Yeah.
And that's the other piece,
Exactly.
is it's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
the,
Okay.
yeah.
I will say, if the chair is planning to extend extra time to a group, that has to be done at the outset.
Mm-hmm.
And it has to be to every group. So, yeah, you can mention that at the beginning, but you should probably expect, if you do that, that you are going to get a lot of 5-minute time periods from people claiming they're with a group. And maybe also trying to get 3 minutes in public comment.
Yeah.
Best not.
That's not.
Is there, at the conference, they had this whole segment on disorderly conduct in meetings and how to handle it as a chair. So is there a recommendation for not disorderly conduct per se, but for people saying, yeah, I'm with that person? So a speaker gets up and they're like, woohoo, or make sounds in the audience. Do you let it go if it's not too disruptive, or say, hey, just raise your hand? If you're,
That
is
is
there-
fairly-
I think we've added in speaker notes in the past where we thought that we might have a number of people to indicate that it's going to be a lengthy hearing. If you can keep any comments or applause or whatever they're going to do, keep keep that to a minimum. It allows for us to get through the business more
Okay.
quickly. But, people are still going
Doesn't
to
work.
do it.
It is a bit
Okay.
of, yeah, it depends on the situation. I do think that if you get to a point of allowing cheering, the next thing that comes is booing
Right.
for
Yeah.
opposition,
Right.
and that really does start to deter people from speaking.
Right.
So to the extent that you can kind of stop that before it gains too much momentum, I think
Yeah.
it's better off, because once if booing does start occurring, that for sure can't happen, because now
Right.
we're discouraging people from participating.
Okay.
The other thing I'd like to add to that is that if people start cheering and somebody else is waiting to talk, they can't start talking while that noise is happening because they're not heard. So
Right.
that is really, I think, the best way to approach it, is the explanation of like, I understand that you have the emotion, but we can't hear the next person. And
Right.
it's a courtesy to make sure. And the thing is we actually, if it's happening, it's really hard to pick up the person talking on the audio.
Gotcha. Okay.
So,
Anthony handled it well at
He did.
Palisades with, kind of the reasoning that everyone's got busy lives and, you start taking extra time, this person's gotta go get their child or what have you, so it just kinda keeps it until he yelled at the one guy, and that was my favorite moment.
Me too.
My favorite moment when he yelled at the guy, and then the two guys sitting right here, one guy goes, "A little aggressive, dude."
I
Oh, yeah.
cringed when that happened, actually.
Oh, I
Yeah.
That was one of my favorite.
You know, I think normally if you just ask them not to do it,
Yeah, and then remind them.
they will calm it down.
Well-
But you never will totally control it.
Yeah.
On the ranch project,
You mitigate it.
the reason I
yeah.
like not doing it is because it does stop the people who have a different opinion from getting up and making their comment. The ranch, the room was packed with people that were against it, and then poor Mr. Setzer, the landowner, got up
Right.
after all of that, and, he has a right to speak, and he had good points, and, it's hard to do that when everyone's like,
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, moving on in the document, we do have a section 6, or Roman 6, in the document on the Brown Act. And that is a topic that we had here down, kind of bundled together with a Brown Act refresher, administrative record, and public record act request. So not sure if we want to kind of dive into that a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah, and we've actually covered a lot of the
We
things
have.
that I was thinking about talking about. But one thing that I think is just important to remember is that you do run into a Brown Act violation anytime we have a majority of commissioners in one room. That starts making it an area of concern. So that comes up. It comes up before the meeting. It comes up after the meeting. You just have to be careful of kind of the fact that if there are 4 of you in a room together, there is that potential for Brown Act violations. And specifically, that means you shouldn't be talking about anything having to do with something that may come before the Planning Commission. You can have a majority of you together talking about the weather, global politics, any of those kind of things that don't relate to what you might be deciding on. You're also allowed to speak about projects that have already gone through the Planning Commission, as long as you're sure they're not coming back. But they do come back sometimes, so just be careful with respect to that. Also, Hannah touched on it earlier, but basically, because you act in this quasi-judicial capacity, it's super important that you don't convey any kind of opinions or perspective on projects until it gets to the Planning Commission. So to the extent you go to a MAC meeting where that project's discussed, you're there in a kind of informational capacity. You can't provide an opinion on the project because it's not appropriate at that point, and you do run into that potential issue then of conflicting yourself out of the later decision. So just be kind of cognizant of all of that, and that same goes for meeting with project applicants, project opponents. All of them, it's an information gathering session where you can ask questions, they should be providing you information, but you should not be conveying your position on that project to them.
And we should say at the meeting, I met with the applicant, I took a tour of the
Yeah.
project.
That's
It's really
best
a best
practices to
practice.
explain kind of any of that. And to the, I've mentioned this a few times too, but to the extent you meet with one side and the other
Yeah.
side wants to meet with you, you should be welcoming to that meeting as well. or you can decide not to meet with any of them. That's certainly fine. But if you've okayed a meeting with one, then you really should meet with the other as well. And some of that is optics. Some of that is that potential conflict of interest.
Can you explain Brown Act buddies? Like,
So Brown Act buddies is kind of, I mean, some people love that term, some people hate that term, but essentially, you have a Brown Act violation when you get to a majority of the commissioners speaking. So that's 4, right? That also means 3 commissioners can speak on a topic and not be in violation of the Brown Act. So that's where Brown Act buddies comes from, is you might find another person on the commission that you want to talk with about the project before the meeting. That's allowed. It's not a violation of the Brown Act, but it is fraught with issues in that if that other person then talks to another commissioner, then you potentially get to a Brown Act violation.
that
So,
serial meeting thing?
right, if you have a, quote, Brown Act buddy or somebody you've decided to talk to about the project, make sure you both know we are talking about this, but we can't talk to anybody else about it, and you're confining it to those 2. Similarly, another Brown Act violation occurs if one commissioner speaks to each commissioner on a one-on-one basis and hits that 4 commissioners in providing it. Then you've also got a Brown Act violation. So just be aware of those dynamics. You certainly are allowed to speak with one other commissioner or maybe 2 other commissioners if depending on the amount of people, to convey your position, to talk strategy, whatever that is, as long as you don't get to a majority. And since quorum is 4, majority could be a 3 if we don't have people attending that meeting. And we ran into that when we didn't have seat 3 full, that we kind of, the numbers were reduced, so then it becomes a concern. For the most part, 4 is the one that requires the majority, but just be aware of that dynamic. And certainly the way to get around that is have the discussion in a public meeting instead of that private discussion. Did you have something?
Well, I was also just going to say, and for those of you that were here for Palisades, I mean, we did sort of employ that also with our briefings, where we had buddies, if you will, and did our briefings with all of you, Jack. So.
And staff briefings are treated the same way, right? Staff should not be privy to your position on the project prior to the decision, because if staff is briefing every commissioner, then that would be a Brown Act violation for them to have opinions from each of the commissioners.
What's the consequence of a violation for one of us or for the project? I think I know, but I just want to hear.
So the likely result is rescission of the project, the decision on the project. If it's an intentional violation, you can get into civil and potentially criminal penalties. For the most part, it's just that they ask for rescission of the project or some level of damages against the county as a whole. They also can request some sort of censoring or court decision that the county's violated the Brown Act and don't do it again. But all of those are potentially in play. Usually it's tied to a project and they want to rescind the action of the project and get attorney's fees for having brought the lawsuit. And
That's why we didn't go to your house for drinks before Palisades.
yeah, and also putting it in the
I was looking
newspaper
for
that
two
the
buddies,
county's
but you
violated
guys
the
didn't
Brown
share.
Act, and then commenting about how the county's violated the Brown Act
Yeah,
and
got it.
can't be trusted, all those kinds of things.
And-
So,
Oh, go ahead,
I would say,
George.
just a similar topic, conversations between us and the applicant and us and the public. We get requests all the time. You know, we've gotten a number of requests coming in this time. From some of the discussions we've had, I figured, because I wasn't responding to anybody. I mean, I figured if I didn't respond to anybody, but I kind of rethought it and I thought, so I got a comment, I think we all probably got it. And my response was, thank you for your comment. And that's all I did. So I replied to the email. I didn't know if that's something we should, out of consideration, we should at least acknowledge that we, as me, the individual commissioner, got his email, just so they know.
I always do that, out of courtesy.
You can certainly do that. That email and your response back all need to be part of the public record, so just make sure you're including the clerk on that.
That's why we need to talk about email.
Yeah.
And also, this happens all the time. Since you have email addresses that are out in the public realm where somebody emails all of you at the same time, you can't respond back to all on that email because
Right.
that's a Brown Act violation.
And this last one, we did
So.
get, it was to all.
So just
Comments from the
whenever
MAC.
you get any of
Oh,
those,
okay.
and you are thinking about responding, make
Right.
absolute sure that you're not
Yeah.
responding all.
Simple
Even if you said
reply.
thank you for your comment, how could that be a Brown
Yeah.
Act? Okay, won't do it.
The quorum, yeah.
Well,
So
Okay,
for it to be a Brown Act violation, it has to be deliberation or discussion about it. I mean, we would certainly argue that a
Best
thank you
practice.
is not discussion.
got it.
But to the extent there's anything more, thank you, I will consider this, or something like that, then we start getting into that issue of Brown Act concerns.
Yeah, and I mean, so I think the best thing is at no point is staff emailing you guys all, we
Right.
don't, when we do our communications to you,
BCC.
it is not, you guys don't see all that. So I think the other thing is to just not get in the best practice of replying all if the commissioners are on. Because even, like Clayton said, even a thank you, somebody can bring it up, and then we have to address it. I mean,
Sure.
whether it's valid or not, it does take our offices responding to those accusations. And then there is just the perception of somebody out there saying, even if all the response was thank you, somebody saying, well, I saw an email where a commissioner included all the other commissioners on it, and not giving the context of that,
Sure.
so that's why it's
So procedurally, when you send us something, or Kelsey, they copy Clayton and sometimes,
Craig and Chris, always, yeah.
should we reply all there or just say simple?
You can reply all to the three of us.
Because we don't see them because it's
Yeah.
BCC'd, so we know that
You
it's.
can
that's
reply,
fine.
if it's the three of us,
Yeah.
no issue, it's really just if it's the seven of you on it, then.
I mean, do you guys want to get the reply, or you, because we're in.
We get a lot of emails that we
Yeah,
just.
my corporate rule has always been, if a person is copied, then they would want to know what the reply was.
So,
If they're BCC'd, not necessarily.
Here's
or
what I will
CC'd.
tell you is that particularly as it relates to the administrative record, my office, because like Clayton said, your response, your thank you is part of the administrative record because it is a comment on the project. It's the way it's viewed. We would rather get that 10 times over. So I'd rather I get it, Clayton gets it, Chris gets it, Kelsey gets it,
Okay.
than not get it at all.
Okay,
So when I replied to that person, I should have CC'd you. Okay.
So when we get email from our other email addresses, because they're out there in the public realm, the one from Dave Cook where I just said, no, I don't need to meet with you, I send that to you.
Yep,
Got it.
yep. Send it into the. So
Those
and I
are
guess
all in the public realm. Just one caveat to that is anything that you send to me is attorney-client privileged. Anything that you send to Chris and I together is attorney-client privileged. So to the extent you
send it
have
to
a
Megan?
question about process, concerns about conflict, all of those kind of things,
Okay.
if you send it to me, that doesn't enter the public realm.
So I think this is kind of a good segue into the email conversation.
Yep.
Okay.
I have one quick
Okay.
question.
Okay.
So, hitting back on George's, so I get lots of inquiries
do I.
about upcoming projects from the public. So it's okay then to meet with people, hear people out, because to me that's part of being a public servant, but just be sure not to give my point of view or
Exactly.
concerns I might see on the project or good things I might see. So just try not to counter anything, good or bad. Is that like a safe way to
I think
handle
that's
it?
a safe way to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Usually
Okay.
the people that are requesting those meetings are likely the people that would want to raise Brown Act violations because depending on how the determination goes, they may want to try and get that
Okay.
rescinded. So they're going to be the prime candidates for people that would argue issues, and they could actively be trying to get Brown Act violations by getting your opinion, getting three other commissioners' opinions to overturn that project approval. So just be cognizant
Yeah.
of the most likely people to raise those issues are likely the people that you're going to be meeting with.
Okay.
Yeah,
So-
you don't want to
Okay.
give any indication that it's a
Neutral.
pre-decisional,
Yeah. Yeah.
determination on your part by questions you're asking, comments that you're making, and so forth.
Because there's
Okay.
all these Hope Way meetings coming up with Penryn Chit Chat, and Anthony had a big one with all the Donna Delno and all those folks. So just neutral, just neutral. You go, you
Information
listen,
gathering.
Mm-hmm.
attend, listen.
No opinions.
Get their point of view, ask questions about why they have that point of view.
And then if Trent wants to meet with the applicant, then he goes through you guys.
Not necessarily. It doesn't have to go through us.
Just
Well,
let,
he'd have to
just
go-
let you know that I
Let
would do
them
it.
know,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And again, I think that as we talked about earlier, when the project does come before you, to mention
Mhm.
that you've met with the applicant, you've met with whomever else you've met with, is a best practice.
But getting back to the email, as a commissioner, getting an email from the public, to be safe, just don't respond unless I have a compelling reason to respond. And then there's no
It's really up to
public
you.
record
Yeah.
and requirement or any of that.
I just always say
Because
thank you.
I usually don't respond.
I hate when I send something out into
Yeah, I
the
do too.
atmosphere and I don't get anything back. I just personally hate that. So I always say thank you for your comment, every single time.
But in my mind, that's going to 7 of us, so it's.
If it's,
kind of a-
if it's
Oh,
to
I'm
you
just talking about people
personally,
from my district.
if it's to you personally, that would be a reason to respond. But if it's to
Not
to
necessarily.
every
I don't-
commissioner,
Right.
then,
I'm talking about things that just come to me from District 1. And they just come to me and they don't come to everybody. I just
Oh,
always say
okay.
thank you.
Yeah,
for
no,
your
I
comment.
that's
get
a
that.
good
If they're in your
qualifier.
district and you're
Yeah.
representing them, but I don't, yeah, maybe I think a little differently there.
You don't have any obligation to respond.
Okay,
It's just
I guess that's
however
fine.
you,
Yeah.
you wanna handle it.
And by not responding, there's no, it's not part of the public record, no, don't need to CC you guys or anything like that, obviously.
I guess what we're
Well,
asking,
the
are
email
we
still comes
encouraged
in.
or discouraged? And you don't need to answer that.
One thing that is a mandatory response is if they ask for a document from you. So that puts it into the Public Records Act, which can be made in any forum. So to the extent you do get an email and they're asking you for a document, it may be fairly rare that it happens. But if it does, that's something you need to forward to the clerk right away, so
What if
we
I
can get on
forward
it.
a link that's on the county website? So they can't find it. Here's the in lieu fee study. Here's the link. It's from your website.
We would still want to be included if you provided it.
Okay, that was a
Because
long
the
time
thing,
ago.
so we'll get it,
That was a
the
long
next
time ago.
topic was admin record and public records act requests. So the administrative record is all of the documents that go into the consideration of a hearing. So, and there's very specific rules about how we share that. So we do not, like, we post all of this information online. We verify that it's posted to the public, and then you get it, because we have to make it available simultaneously. So this includes the staff report, all the supporting documents, any on-file documents, which we don't typically have for you guys, but we did with like Palisade. Some of the larger projects will have on-file documents. But then it also gets into the other documents, the PowerPoint presentation that staff does, and the correspondence. So while, yes, people are communicating to you their opinions on it, it is also really important to them that that other members of the public see that same correspondence. The number of times that we have people check online to make sure that their comments were there. I mean,
Sure.
they want that. So, that's why your emails, that's why we're going to talk about that. It's such an important thing, because it does let people know that there was not an email. Even though it's just a thank you email, it lets them know that we're tracking all of it. We're keeping track of all of it, and there was no email that went out that had anything on it it shouldn't have. Public Records Act request. So that's heavily the admin record is typically what they're looking for, is documents within the admin record. They are available online. And I don't have any issue with you providing the link. Just make sure that my office receives that as well, because we have to reply to public records in a very specific time frame, and we have to ensure that we've covered what they've asked for. So it is just something that my office wants to be able to make sure that we see it and we go, yep, this link covered everything they asked for, and we don't have to, and we can consider the response as closed.
Okay. I'm thinking, this before Commissioner Beckler was a commissioner, I sent her a link to the in lieu fees thing. She didn't ask for it.
Mhm.
It was information I was providing to her.
So that's different,
There was a
because
link.
you're providing the information without it being requested. But
Yeah,
if
she didn't
someone
ask.
were to send you an email and say, can you provide me the, and they have to ask for documents.
Gotcha.
But they can also, even if they just call you and say, can you provide me, that's still a Public Records Act request, and you would
Put it through you.
put it through us. And you can do that one of two ways. One, you can give them our contact info, and they are welcome to reach out to us directly. Even if you do that, please follow up with us to tell us that that's how you handled it. Because if they don't follow through, they're not really required to,
Okay.
because they've already asked it of you. So at that point, we are still obligated to respond to it, whether they choose to follow up with my office or not. So that's The other option you have is you can coordinate it through our office, and we will, you know,
Yeah, I would think if an individual knows enough to come to you to ask for some information, they would know enough to go to you to get that information as the official
Yeah.
Well, could I
resource.
just do this? If somebody from my district, this does happen regularly, says, can you get me X, Y, and Z?
Same here.
Can I just forward
that's
it to you and say,
that's
I'm
my point.
forwarding this to
Absolutely.
Megan, who's the
Absolutely,
clerk, and she'll
yes.
help you get this information, so I'm out of it.
100%, you can
Yeah.
absolutely
I'm
do
gonna
that,
choose
and
that
that would be our
option. I am
preference.
too.
I'm gonna choose that
So
option.
that would be,
Because sometimes I just go out and get it, because I have it, or I know where it is, or I can point them to the right, but I prefer not to if it's gonna create like a hassle.
yeah, no, our preference would be that that you just do it, handle it exactly that way.
Okay,
Is send an email handing it off to us, and then we can track it and ensure that they get responded to.
that's
Yeah.
fine.
So yeah, that
Oh.
is,
Also, any contentious projects that get a lawsuit filed, the first step of those lawsuit filings is they submit a Public Record Act request for any communications on that project. Those emails then get included in the administrative record that become part of what the judge looks at, what all of the parties
Mhm.
look at. And I will say, some of the most damaging items that we've gotten in defending lawsuits come from innocuous email, or initially innocuous emails from people kind of providing opinions on things that they really don't have any kind of knowledge about, or maybe not a strong understanding about, but it speaks as a coming from the county because of their role in the county. So just be careful of that, and to the extent that you kind of are debating whether or not to send an email, just kind of think about what would that look like in the lawsuit, because that is routinely the things we end up having to explain to a judge. And yeah, a lot of this is on county staff more than
Yeah.
commissioners, but the kind of the flippant, cavalier emails between coworkers isn't always the greatest forum to try and explain to a judge in a lawsuit.
Always ask yourself, is it gonna be in the SAC? If it was in the
Yes,
SAC B,
how
what
would
do
I
you
feel?
do? If a
Yes.
judge sees it, what do you do? If your
Right.
grandmother sees
Yep.
it, what would you do?
How would I feel?
That's right.
So on the email account portion, so we are creating email accounts, or have created email accounts for all of you. Unfortunately, some of you have Outlook already, and it doesn't let you. It won't work, and we just recently found that out. So we are looking. We're going to get you other email accounts. It's really important to utilize the email accounts that we provide to you, and it may be that we have you set up a specific, Yahoo account. We're still working through that piece, and I don't know. I'm just throwing it out.
Make it AOL then.
But we will have the reason that we want you to work through those accounts is
Hotmail.
that it ensures that we can search them.
Yeah.
Right.
That's the piece.
Yeah.
So just as an understanding that when we get a Public Records Act request, or we're preparing an admin record, we go by the time frame given, and we are going to let you know that we need you to do a search of your phone and your personal email and provide us all those documents, but we're also going to go in and search it ourselves. We're going to go in and pull those documents out of those emails to make sure that we're in compliance and that we are providing everything out. So the other thing that we are probably going to do is set up just kind of an automatic CC email that will get all of the emails, and it gives us an easy search area as well. So we're still working through it a little bit. The security settings on all of these agencies, that all of us, our security settings, and then your employer's security settings collided us a bit with Outlook. So
Yeah, because it just happened, because I was getting the Outlook
Yeah.
emails.
So the CC will be to you, or would it be could I set it up to get it to a separate email for me? I'm horrible at monitoring it.
So we can work with that. We can get
Yeah, you're
Yeah.
just
yeah.
you've got mail.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Without having to go in and sign in and log in
Yeah.
and all that.
Yeah,
That
we
would
can.
be very helpful.
We just recently actually did that with some of our, we have a state, the CAL FIRE contract. So the unit chief is part of our department head email, but our department head email list won't let us put an outside email, a state email on it. So what we've done is we've created an email that is a county email, but it forwards out to a state. So we can do things like that with it and, you know, but what we're looking to do, and just so that everybody's, you know, well aware, we're collecting all your emails that you use on planning commission. That's what we're doing. That's our goal. That's our job. So.
Okay, so it sounds like now, maybe that's what my problem is. I have Microsoft 365,
Mm-hmm.
and so it's conflicting with the
Yeah.
counties.
Mine works fine. I have 365. I got it
And
on
it's working on both?
Yeah, works on my phone, works on my laptop. I have 365.
Yeah, we ran into it with Robin, and they looked at, and our firewall blocked the way that her.
We have government, state and federal contracts, and we have requirements around our
Uh-huh.
firewall that doesn't let
Sure.
other entities
Yeah.
access or add accounts.
Right.
So you can have an outside Outlook account on Outlook Web, but they don't allow that because that also isn't secure. So my security doesn't allow me to get a Placer email, and their security doesn't allow me to use a web email
Yeah.
interface.
Right.
So it was a stalemate. We tried different ways, and
Yeah.
it just wasn't working.
So
And-
mine
and-
shouldn't be blocked then. It should be working.
It should be working, and we're working through IT right now. So it is going to be that we're going to have IT individual meetings in IT, but we are setting up just across. We're going to have a CC done. That's just a standard.
And
That's
I
good.
tried to set it up on my tablet, but
So-
it wouldn't let me.
Wouldn't-
So
wouldn't do- it was like you have enough devices, George.
yeah,
No
I
more.
figured 2 out of 3 was good enough.
Mine's never work ever.
Yeah.
So I don't know where they've all gone. They've gone somewhere, and I feel like people probably think I'm a mean person because I don't respond, but
Yeah,
Some
the
are
clerk thinks
forwarded
that you've
from
been
you,
asleep
which is
this whole
nice.
time.
I know, I'm like, where is he?
Rolled your eyes at him.
So just really quickly. So, Mark, yours isn't working. Robin, I know yours. Amber, your
Mine's not set
Okay,
up properly.
Ron, okay.
That's on me.
I don't
though.
have one.
we haven't established it for you. You're good.
Usually.
And I've
yours
had
just
people ask
recently?
why my email
mine
isn't
is
on the
not
county
working.
Not working.
webpage. I'm
I got the new
only one.
passcode, but
Right, so that'll get up.
Yeah, that'll all get
Okay.
updated. So, okay, that's good
Do you have a
Having
information.
it on
timeline?
is
'Cause it
immaterial.
happened a
I
month
mean-
ago that we stopped getting emails, and people last night asked me, "Did you get my email?"
Did you get it?
And I said, "No, I did not."
Okay, so what
2.5
we'll do
years
right
I've
now,
never had
because
it.
it's a pretty easy solution for us
Yeah,
right now
eventually,
on that front, is knowing that you guys aren't, we have access, so we're pulling all of it anyway.
Oh, good.
So just know that they're not just out in space. Like,
Okay.
we're pulling them and including, but what we will do is, I'll talk with IT. I think that the time frame that they're thinking wasn't, I mean, I think we're within like a week maybe or so of
But you
of
can
rolling out.
push the ones that are in there to their other email
Yeah,
accounts.
but
just
I was
so
gonna
that
say,
they-
right now, we can get you what's in there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was gonna ask you, it seemed like it was around
You're gonna
big
follow.
projects, but kind of a day or two before the hearing, all of a sudden I'm getting my normal emails getting, public comment letters, and I'm wondering.
Are those coming from planning commission,
From Kelsey.
from Kelsey?
Yeah,
Yeah, because
So-
we send to both right now, as, you know, that's been our standard, is to send to both the email
okay,
addresses.
so it'll be in both places,
Mhm.
okay. But,
so should we wait or make an appointment?
Wait, we'll reach out. We'll set the
but
appointment.
in the future, will I be getting it in both places as well?
No,
Okay,
we'll pick one, but we'll work with you. I mean, we're gonna,
maybe forward it to,
mhm.
okay.
So one time there was a discussion or a comment about maybe going to tablets, so you would have all the documentation online and maybe even the email system online. Is that, been
So
any
we
further
are,
thought about that?
That's something that we didn't include here, but that's certainly something worth
Yeah.
talking about. I'm sure it
Oh,
would
the other
make,
cities have them. They said they went away from paper and they gave everybody iPads.
They did. So there is,
It's like, great, one more electronic device.
I know.
I don't know.
Look at
What-
your face, just keep
I
going.
know,
Too
it's
many
all the issues
laptops.
that come with that.
So I was gonna say, so
We don't
we
wanna do
are,
that.
the board we purchased, the county purchased a system a couple years ago called One Meeting. Well, at the time it was called Prime Gov. And we did that because that was the hope, was to move away from hard copies. You know, we have a split on the board where some members are like, give me a tablet, let me work with that. And then we have other members that want hard copies. We did it because the internal process of my office being able to get the agenda items and them being approved through the system was a lot easier. It used to be, they would literally like in our office or drive down a hard copy and we're there doing it. So we are utilizing that system right now for routing items. We haven't implemented it yet for planning commission, but Chris and I have talked about that. Unfortunately, one meeting was bought out by a company called Granicus. Granicus is they are the top of it. And they have a system called Legistar that has been their tried and true, and it is, it works really well. Unfortunately, Granicus is probably one of the worst companies when it comes to customer service that I have ever dealt with in my life. The challenges, if you have something go wrong, the challenges in dealing with them historically had been really, really bad. One meeting, just like I said, they just recently purchased it. My team and IT have gone back into negotiations with them. We are looking at whether or not we will stay with one meeting or if we will move to the tried and true Legistar. Because at this point, what we've realized is it doesn't matter what system we go to, Granicus is going to buy it. So we are now just going to say, okay, let's figure out how to work together because we're never getting around it. They have had a lot of turnover and seem to be doing much better on a customer service standpoint. And I am, just my personal opinion, we have to go through the full process. I am inclined to transition into the Legistar. It has a lot of really nice features. One of those features being is that it does connect the meetings as they move forward. So as it moves from planning commission to the board, it keeps that history.
It summarizes really
It
nicely. You annotate a question and it'll give you your question list.
And it does still have the ability, and
Our clients use it.
I will say that the thing it does have is the ability to use a tablet if that is your preference, or still print if that is the preference. So Chris and I have been.
But would you be providing the tablets like those other cities do? They gave everybody tablets.
Yes, because we would want that is
Control of
yes.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
so-
only that on that tablet.
Yeah, exactly. It would
Okay.
be, just that. And
That and Candy Crush. would be
yeah,
all.
Chris and I are, when we first kind of started this and said, okay, we're going to transition with my office clerk, Chris and I have a lot that we would really like to do. And what we've realized is we just have to take one bite at a time on
It's
some
an
of
iterative
this.
approach.
Yeah.
So from the user perspective, a couple of things that always get me is, so that binder over there. So the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna spend an hour going through and tabbing it. So I
Yeah.
gotta figure out when section 1 ends and section 2 ends and when each
Yeah.
exhibit. So the thought was, there's always a summary at the end of the item, and it says Appendix A, Appendix B, to put what page that is. Now, I don't know if that's a lot of extra work, and it may be.
Yes.
It is.
But if there was a page there, then you can go to that page.
I
Anyway,
second
that's
that,
one of them.
George.
And the other is, I go online and I want to look at an EIR, and maybe this is just me, but the vast majority of them have all the individual sections of the EIR. So the latest one, and I won't even mention his name, the last item is the whole EIR. So you can just click on it, download the whole EIR, and do what you want to do. So that's just a thing for the future when you list the project online and it has the 30 sections of the EIR, to also give you the option to download the whole EIR. Otherwise, you can just, if you're going to be offline and you want to read this stuff, you got to spend the first hour and a half downloading all the sections of the EIR. Anyway, that's just the user
Actually,
side.
having one PDF makes it easier to
It
search
does.
through too.
Oh,
I
yeah.
just do
Yeah.
Control F for my keyword.
Yeah.
That's why I
Yeah.
You'd have to
put it
buy
in
a bigger
PDF and
computer.
annotate
That's
it.
what I do.
I got plenty of computers. I
That's what
guess.
I do.
Is it helpful to always have the environmental document as the last?
Yeah.
Yeah, last word.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, just in terms of that,
Right.
that there's all these other attachments
think
and
Sure.
that, that's
Yeah,
gonna
the
be
last link
probably
is
the
the whole
most
thing.
lengthy document
Yeah.
that's
Oh, yeah,
included.
this particular one's 2,230
Mhm.
pages, I believe.
Yeah.
And that's not included in that binder.
Trent is like,
That's supplemental
addition.
material.
work on your weekend plans.
Yeah,
So, and I
yeah,
just-
whatever you had planned before.
So that actually leads into just a good thing, and I think all of you know this. So we transitioned the planning commission, the agenda website for your planning commission, to mimic the boards. It allows us a lot more freedom and flexibility in what we post, and we post those additional documents pages, which is where you will find, and we try to link the EIRs there. We try to link them in one document.
Mhm.
But at that point,
Yeah.
you've gotten your agenda packet, so it's not a lot of time to read through a
Right.
2,200-page document. But that's also where we link all of the correspondence and the PowerPoints and all that. And we send that all out to you, and Kelsey provides those links. But just as a reminder, that's always a really good spot to direct people
Yeah,
to go.
and you
members
say
of the
historically, the link was to the page, the project page, and it had the 30 sections of EIRs.
public. Right.
So,
So for Trent, who's new, the project page, when we get our status report or our look ahead or look forward report, you'll see things that are coming up in your district. You can go to that project page and it
Right.
does have most of the application, all the important documents before it gets agendized and before we get the link sent to us. So you can still have access to that information. You just have to go to the project page,
To the extent that we have one.
to the extent that you have.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and
I'm
for
talking
a lot
the
of
big
major
ones.
projects,
The
yeah.
major projects, that's all I'm talking about.
Yep.
The little
Yep.
ones, no. Okay, are we done with questions? We're gonna go to public comment. Do we still have Diane on the line?
We do.
All right.
Give me 1 second. Okay. Diane, go ahead and give your comments.
Greetings, Commissioners. This is Diane Stacy from Pershing Valley Park. Thank you. It's a little bit of a put out here. So if I can roll back a little bit, I want to just, I appreciate this quite a lot, this listening in on your discussion, especially going back over some nuances of Brown Act and so on and so forth, because I sit as a board director on Christian Valley Park Community Services District, and we do our best, but there's some nuances in there that I think that's like, kind of come from it from that perspective. So this is gonna be to legal, to parse out yielding, when you have, when you're making public comment and you're within your 3 minutes, and yielding to another participant the remainder of your time. Say you have 1.5 minutes, do you have provision or notice that lets the public know that they can assign the remainder of their time to another speaker? And or reserve half your time to have rebuttal at the end of the comment section. Because I know this is a parliamentary procedure that does get carried out, especially in Washington. Also, I want to say, in my email scenario, the website has a pass-through. In other words, it has my name at christianvalley.org. But I have it passed through to an encrypted ProtonMe account because I get hammered. They do scraping on the websites all the time, and you get scammers all the time. So that's why I chose to do it that way. And if I have a communication with one of the constituents, I will then reintroduce myself from the encrypted email. So I'd like your take on that. And lastly, when you started, say, for instance, this is a question in my mind, Zoom participation globally or for the entire public at large on, say, the RENA 6 recommendations, should you not continue that to its total endpoint where it's submitted and approved by HCD? Now, granted, March 27th is supposed to be for that amendment for HCD, but if for some reason it doesn't get finalized or that is not the final one, and you go back into this removal of hybrid, where, you have to be ADA accommodated, isn't there a fine line in there that under grounds, you started it with a certain structure for participation, and then you remove that before the conclusion? So with that, I yield. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to the answers from legal.
Thank you, Diane. Megan, do we have any other public comment?
We do not.
I'm gonna close public comment and let legal answer.
Yeah,
If they want to.
Yeah, I can answer some of these. The encrypted email is one that's beyond my skill level, so I cannot answer that one. But in terms of yielding time to another speaker, there's nothing in the Brown Act that requires that. I think you do run into a problem. If they yield time to another speaker, you're essentially giving that other speaker additional time. So you would then need to give all additional speakers the same amount of time. So I think practically it doesn't make much sense to yield time because of that downfall and the fact that you'd be adding time to somebody else's and you would have to then give that same amount of time to others. But there is some flexibility with the chair, whether they're inclined to do that, knowing those downsides, from a
It's
legal perspective.
tracking problem. How many, you have 60, seconds left, or you've got 29 seconds. That's the tracking issue.
Just to add into what Clayton has said, is there is the tracking issue, of it, but it is also that, you run into a thing of somebody saying, well, I didn't want to speak, but I'm going to yield my time to this person. So that's also something else, is you get somebody getting up to yield time, which could give, as Clayton was saying, it could give one speaker an extension of time to a very large extent, which is not fair to the rest of the participants of the meeting.
And how would you treat the folks that had already spoken?
That's
You have
the
to-
issue.
You have to
We would have to-
technically give them the allowances, then speak the extra minute or 2 minutes.
No, but the
So-
fairness is everybody gets 3 minutes. That's just fair.
That is the-
Yeah. And that kind of goes into, there was a comment about reserving time for rebuttal. Everyone is allotted 3 minutes. To the extent you kind of give them a second bite, you would have to track it. And then everyone has to have that same opportunity, so you would essentially, I guess, bifurcate or trifurcate public comment to 3 separate sections. It just logistically, from my perspective, seems like it would
Too
be too
complicated?
difficult to follow and
Yeah.
try and manage.
I agree.
But the main rule is everyone's got to have the same amount of time, and you can't restrict one person to a mechanism that you're not restricting the others. So if you're allowing one person to bifurcate their time, you have to allow all of them to bifurcate their time. So then you're setting up essentially 2 comment periods.
And what are you, on that as well, are you saying that you get a minute and a half for your comment and a minute and a half for your rebuttal? But that's also a piece to this, there's a lot to monitor in that in order to remain fair.
And for people understanding what a rebuttal is. And it's not just half my comment, half my comment.
Right.
I
And
would,
there,
I would wonder why somebody was even asked for that, to tell you the truth. I've seen it happen before, but if you are saying that everybody gets 3 minutes, then it's superfluous.
Yeah.
there is one thing that's kind of related to this, kind of unrelated, but staff does do a response time at the end. Certainly if you're engaging in some kind of quasi-judicial matter where you've got an appellant and maybe a project applicant, then they also, they have an allotted time for that public hearing. They may also, at the discretion of the chair, get time to then provide rebuttal as part of that hearing, judicial
done
hearing
that.
dynamic.
Yes, we have done that.
But those are separate from the public comment period. Those are for, I guess, the actively involved in the hearing. Zoom meetings, Ms. Alessi had commented about, since the rezone had started in a virtual format, does that mean it needs to be carried through? There is no requirement of carrying through the same process. There is not actually a requirement for Zoom attendance or virtual attendance, and there hasn't been. There's been the option, which became more prevalent during COVID, but certainly not a requirement that it needs to be carried through for each item. And I think I've addressed
Yeah.
her comments.
Before I adjourn the meeting, any additional comments, questions from anyone?
My personal opinion on the Zoom meeting, I understand the ADA reasonable accommodation. I get the proximity accommodation with I-80, and but outside of those, maybe I'm a little old school, but I think if you want to be heard and have your voice heard and address an issue, you should, if you have the ability, make the time to be here in person. That's just my personal opinion. I was new post-COVID to the Zoom, and I was very surprised that that was still going on, but that's just my personal opinion. I do think there should be accommodation for the proximity issue and then also any ADA requirements, but beyond that, come to the meeting and be heard.
Commissioner Watts?
I did come across legislation that would extend it for organizations like this quasi indefinitely, so
That
look
is,
forward to
that
that
is
as an option.
moving forward. That is in the works, and there's people on all sides.
So commissioners, take your binder before you leave. We will see you next week. and meeting adjourned.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
What's going on with Lakes Lot? I used to have a place in Serene Lakes, I was always.
Quite a bit.
Very helpful.